And good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. What a beautiful morning. Road to work. 710 KNUS Radio Free Denver. 710 KNUS Weather Center weather. Beauty. 86 today. Tomorrow it holds up. 70 degrees. Back to work Monday. 60 degrees. We have, I think, a tremendous show this morning. This triggers off of a Jeff and Billy show. And it was earlier in the week, and I'm going to the dentist, to Dr. Richter. And I'm listening, as I do, to the Jeff and Billy show. And they have a man on, a guest on culture. They're talking about the idea of what's happening to culture. And this man brings up the Grimm brothers, Jacob and Wilhelm, and about what good Christian men they were and how they wrote these stories. And, well, none of that's, well, they were good Christian men. They didn't write the stories. They collected the stories. And they collected some pretty rough ones. And in principle, and I spent a little bit of time with this and wrote a paper on it, and big deal, and read some of the, not in German, in different dialects. They collected in Bavaria. They collected in Prussia. They collected in, parts of Germany. Parts would become a modern Germany. And they were pretty vicious. And more than once, the evil person was not a witch, was rather a Jew. And it spoke so much about the groundwork of the rise of the Nazis. And so I spread it. I thought a lot about it, came on the show with the guys, and it was really a good experience. In Nazi Germany, the relationship between the Nazi regime and religion was very complex. It was multifaceted. And while initially the regime attempted to appease the Christian churches, particularly the Protestants, eventually aimed to control and reshape religious institutions to align with their ideology. And in fact, it began. Smaller religious minorities, like Jehovah's Witnesses, were persecuted. Judaism, of course, was targeted for eradication. But it's a really interesting breakdown in the rise of culture. So I thought this over, and I said, Peter, in your lengthy life, we've had three great dictatorial empires. We've had Germany, Japan, and China. And we've had three cults of personality. And so how did it happen? Role of culture, religion, leading to what? So coming up, Professor Smith, who is the best I know. But the other one I want to lead the show with is watching the culture of Harley Davidson. And this week there was an upheaval, and they got rid of their CEO. Now, I take you back in time, and I'm talking to Chuck Bonnewa. I think this may be a column I want to do, but Ronald Reagan saved Harley Davidson. And what did he do? Tariffs. Take you back in time, 1983. The double R's there. He intervened to protect Harley by imposing tariffs on imported motorcycles. The Japanese were dumping bikes. And if you know the history, and many of you do, AMF, the bowling company, somehow ends up owning, controlling interest of this wonderful company that means so much to so many people. And it's the early 80s, and Harley is facing significant financial difficulties due to intense competition, principally from Japanese manufacturers. It's called dumping or flooding the United States market with cheaper motorcycles. They were selling, Honda, for instance, was selling their big bikes competitive to the Harley-Davidson touring bikes. They were selling them cheaper in the United States than they were selling them in Japan. And their aim was, of course, to put Harley out of business. So a group of people led by Willie G. Davidson, legendary Willie G., and a guy's last name was Bluestein, and a couple of these guys, they get the company back. They wrest it back from AMF. And then they realize, and something that is called the United States International Trade Commission, and they pressured them about the influx of Japanese motorcycles was harming domestic industry, and they recommended protective measures. And here comes Reagan. Ronald Reagan agreed to impose a tariff. Remember that word, tariff, on imported motorcycles with engines over 700 cc's, raising the tariff, and I had to go look this up, from 4.4% to 49.4%. He raises the tariff on any MC coming in from Japan over 700 cc's, raises the tariff from 4.4% to 49.4%. And Harley Davidson begins to get on its feet. The tariff was designed to impose relief, and they weren't asking for tax breaks. They weren't asking for infusions of funds. They said, protect us, give us a chance to be able to get on our feet. And so according to everything that I've read and people that I've talked to, and actually one of the men that was involved in this, and the tariffs helped Harley regain market share and allowed the company to invest and improve and innovate. And Harley Davidson also used this time to retune factories. They built new engines. That's where all these things started to be. And it is the gift of Willie G. Davidson, who was the grandson of the last of the Davidsons. And they got new technology and Harley tariffs, and Ronald Reagan protected the company from foreign bikes. And when Uncle Sam targeted imported bikes to save Harley Davidson, they were saved. Now, they went along and along and along and along, and now, for whatever hell reason, the new board decides to bring in this character who was Puma Shoes. He was the CEO of the, and he's a, as we fondly say, they're Euro trash. So he's going to wake Harley Davidson. Remember when Tractor Supply woke up and the rest of the woke policies? Now, the year before, up in Sturgis, there was a beer manufacturer. Talk about people that are stupid and don't learn anything. That's the part that just flushes me. So they decided to, remember when they were doing the transsexual beer things? I tell you, I was there for both of these. And they have a big influx of, an attempt to have a lot of influence in the rally, where from all blessings flow. Nobody goes into their beer barn. It was empty. My friend Kenny and I are there, and they didn't even bring the horses out. It was like people were done. And they totally boycotted this beer simply because, and I was talking to Bonnewell about it, there was a woman in the beer company that made the decision to put a transsexual in a beer ad and then take the whole thing to Sturgis. It's called knowing your market, knowing your demo, knowing your customer. I've worked in this business a zillion years, sold a lot of live stuff on there, never sold Clearasil. I never sold Zit Cream. Our demo's not there, and that was the point of this, what did they think? So now the CEO, ex-CEO, stepping down CEO of Harley Davidson, and this is, if you know much about all of this, then you know how important Sturgis is. And we did the radio show in Sturgis, and we did TV up there, and I love Sturgis. I'm making my plans to go already this year. So Harley Davidson, Jochen Zeitz, Z-E-I-T-Z, there it is. And he has been this new chairman, president, CEO brought in to run Harley Davidson. And he's been an active advocate for all of this nonsense, woke stuff. So he worked for Puma, and he also worked for, someone said, luxury goods. Well, there's your Harley demo right there, buddy. So here's the Harley demo. Basically, they're veterans, they're middle age, male, Trump supporters, conservative, Second Amendment advocates. You know, get down the list. These are guys I hang with. I mean, I know who they are. I'm in a club with these fellows. And the motorcycle company comes out with this, and particularly after the year before, when they witnessed what happened with the beer guys. It's almost like George Bush witnessing Afghanistan under the Soviets and going, what the hell, I'll do it too. It was exactly the same kind of a mindset. And people turned on them. And I was there, up in Harley Davidson, and everybody brings up all kinds of stuff, Indian, everybody. You have to see it. It's not what people think it is. But no one was going to Harley Davidson to look for rides or to look at stuff. I mean, it was flat out. And remember, there was John Deere, there was Tractor Supply people, happened to them, the wokeness that took over these companies. And there was a line that someone once said, and I heard it floating around, and it said, if you love America, now listen to this, you will not own a Harley. Dude, if you love America, you will not own a Harley, and I am getting rid of my Harley as soon as possible because of these horrible human beings that rode the bikes and hung out and how they saw the world. And Harley now was in this huge decline. I mean, a bunch of dealerships closed. Everything started to happen. And now suddenly it looks like Harley has slammed the brakes on the woke policies that, I mean, they had biker outrage, social outrage. And they released the statement on Monday denouncing DEI and these other controversial company initiatives in the wake of social media outrage and the pressure of longtime loyal bikers. Guys were mad. I mean, friends of mine who were lifetime guys, man, they were like, they won't go near them. So Harley Davidson's been facing all of these financial challenges, including a major drop in revenue and sales, and even some people talking about the possibility of decline. And that's led to dealership closures and shifts in. I have so many great friends in this business and love them dearly. The company also is grappling with adapting to consumer preferences and facing competition from other motorcycle brands. But they have lost millions of dollars on a bike called a Spark, and it's an electric motorcycle. These are people who are proud of their carbon footprint. I certainly am. I got the carbon footprint out there right now in the parking lot. So, but the real lesson is, and this will be, I think I'm going to do a column on it on Monday, but is what Ronald Reagan did. And, you know, the double R, the last great American. But it's 1983. By the way, lines are open, 303-696-1971 for all the input. Then coming up at 10, we'll have the professor on. We'll begin to talk about culture and religion and the dictatorial empires of my lifetime, the Germans, the Japanese, and the Chinese. That was clearly Hitler and the Emperor and Mao. Did you think what was interesting? I was in here the other day with Jeff and Billy doing some commercial work, and I'm looking at the trading partner stuff. With the exception of Canada and Mexico, everybody else was our enemy in the Second World War. Japan, big trading partner. You know, Germany, trading partner. But anyhow, so the Reagan intervenes and protects Harley Davidson by imposing tariffs on imported motorcycles, and the Japanese were dumping. Everybody knew, and they were screaming about it. Please, they're dumping. And what their aim was, they were selling motorcycles, big touring bikes, and nothing against it. I mean, I think Gold Rings are great motorcycles. Don't misunderstand me. Everybody rides dirt bikes, rides Japanese bikes. But the Japanese at this time, they got you down. They're going to bayonet the wounded, and they're dumping bikes, big bikes, and they're knocking Harley Davidson out of the box. Harley Davidson was run by AMF, knew nothing at all about motorcycling. In the wings are Willie G. Davidson, Bluestein, all these guys that are bikers. What did they do? They went to the double R. Save us. Ronald Reagan, I hear all these people talk about tariffs on talk shows, and I was wondering, what about Reagan's? And I'll go to the phones. Reagan agreed to impose a tariff on imported motorcycles with engines over 700 cc's. The tariff raised, I looked it up, from 4.4%, the Japanese had a field day, to 49.4% the first year. He saved the company. We go to Mike in Wheatridge, Colorado. Good morning. You're on the show.
Hi, Peter. I think that you say this so well that this is something that we have to do.
You got to do it.
I don't think this generation realizes that, we would not have won the war if we didn't have industrial America to bring us up to speed with what the Japanese and the Germans had as far as planes, ships, tanks, whatever. And
it was called, our FDR called our country the arsenal of democracy. In other words, you're right. The mills, one of the things I think this just needs to be done. I don't care if you despise Reagan. Despise Trump.
Right.
Love Trump. This needs to be done.
Well, and I'm a little younger than you, but not, that much.
It's about
and
right.
I grew up in the era of Gates. And I grew up in an era with the World War II dad, the uncles and the dads that wouldn't buy anything from the Japanese, wouldn't let you have the transistor radio like you said your uncle wouldn't allow. Guys that, grew up with American-made parts. The other day I'm watching the news, and this guy's holding up Care Bears and Tonka trucks and saying there's not going to be toys on the shelves for Christmas. And he's holding up a Tonka truck that I played with when I was 6, in the 60s. And I played with that Tonka truck that was made in America. That, this fear factor of this 30-something generation that is so panicked by their 401k. Wake up, America. You are beholden to the Chinese, the Canadians that are saying to you, well, you're beholden to somebody that tomorrow could shut off your cars, shut off your steel, shut off your concrete.
Well, what I think is interesting is the Reagan and Harley model. I got the music. Good call, first call. Thank you, sir. Hang on. 303-696-1971. Lines are open, and I'm looking forward to next hour as well. 710 KNUS. Here we go. Saturday morning, everyone. 710 KNUS, Denver's talk station. I'm Peter Boyles, 303-696-1971. 86 the high, 70 tomorrow, and Monday, 60. Robbie will join us after the docs, after Professor Smith's been on with us for a couple hours. We're talking about the world of flesh and the devil, but the Reagan, and I'm always astounded, but should not be, how the mainstream press doesn't talk about what Ronald Reagan was able to do with and for Harley Davidson, because Harley Davidson goes woke, and the rest, and the beer company Bud Light goes woke, and Tractor Supply goes woke rather, and they all get smashed. And now they've ousted this CEO and ousted a couple board members at Harley Davidson. If not, they're going to crash and burn. Much like if you don't do this now, the same thing is going to happen to you. And it really is the parallel lives. Real quick, Danny Kaplis, and he's my good friend, and talk so much about Dan. And Dan suggests that you choose a lawyer who shares your values, because who you choose to represent you in an injury case says so much about you to everybody in the case. Dan Kaplis is the son of a cop. We've talked about his life and what he's done and the things that he does for others. He is believed to be the only lawyer in Colorado history to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash cases. Danny believed also to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado history. Dan Kaplis Law, the official law firm, and now he's with Nuggets and the Avs. He's Danny, man. A serious firm for serious people. Dan accepts righteous injury cases, percentage fee basis, and represents good people, all walks of life, without regard, ability to pay. He's the man, see the man. Dan Kaplis Law, 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551, or on the internet, it's CAPLIS, dankaplislaw.com. All right, 303-696-1971. What a week it was. Watching all kinds of things happen in the world. The only thing that my only finger in the air, don't be screwing around with these Iranians. I mean, why we are in the Middle East has everything to do with what we have talked about for decades on radio shows. The multinational corporations, the 5 sisters of petroleum. Look, believe me when I tell you, those despots will sell oil and we will buy their oil. We're buying oil from some of the worst people in the world, and we don't talk about it. But when it looks like we mentioned last week in the show, and asking people, do you honest to God believe that Herbert Walker Bush uses the American military to entitle the Democratic People of Kuwait? Do you think that war was fought for the Democratic people of Kuwait, who have no say-so? They have an emir. They don't vote. They don't do jack. They just kind of get the money. But do you think that's what that was about? I got a bridge in Brooklyn, if you think that's what it was about. And if you think Saddam was involved in 9/11, I'll show you 3 bridges in Brooklyn, 2 that aren't even built yet. So I take you back in time, and I made up my mind this will be my column. In what my grandmother would say stuff like, in 1980, but she wouldn't say 83 because she wasn't alive, but she'd say, in 1919 or 1921. Remember they would do that kind of stuff? Old ladies would do that. 1921. 1983, Ronald Reagan intervened to protect Harley Davidson by imposing, what's that word again? Tariffs on imported motorcycles, primarily aimed at the Japanese manufacturers. The action, following the recommendations from the U.S., it's called the International Trade Commission, helped the company recover from bankruptcy or near bankruptcy, put them back on their feet until this next go round screwed them up again. And now they got rid of him. Why did they have to do this? Why did they have to do it? And particularly after, was anybody in the audience up in Sturgis for those last 2 years? 303-696-1971. Were you up there on the street? 303-696-1971. I was for both of them. And the Bud Light had this, and last year we were up there, and Bud Light still had this giant street bar, nobody sitting in it. And it used to be, Bud Light was the beer of champions. And I think that I watched it, and I suspect many of you did too. And I want to know if anybody else saw it. And then coming back the next year, people were still down on Bud Light, wouldn't go near their big, huge street bar. Wouldn't go sit in it. Then Harley Davidson does it, and there's a line of people from here to Timbuktu test driving Indians. I mean, it's like, geez, they're test driving Indians. They're not even going near Harley. And they woke. And that great line, I'll never, like, if you're a real American, and I heard all that stuff. And I suspect many of you guys men and women who ride, heard that stuff as well. But remember, I mean, it was the most absurd thing in a world of absurdity. Here it goes. I had to look this up too. I can't even imagine this. If you love America, you will not own a Harley. I said, what? The motorcycle. I am getting rid of my Harley as soon as possible. All right, here we go. Lines are jammed. We go to Art. Art, you're on a radio show. Good morning. Thank you.
Hi, Peter. Good morning.
Hey, man.
I have a different take on the Bud Light thing, and I think Bud Light was just trying to sell beer, and they don't care if you're black, white, short, tall, fat, skinny.
Agreed.
We just want to sell beer. And
Agreed.
I guess my question for you, why do you care who drinks their beer? If you enjoy the product, you drink it. Why do you care who else drinks it or enjoys it?
Because I don't drink, but I watched what happened up there, and and they took huge hits, and now apparently they have the stand-up comic who, again, I'm just being told this, who is kind of a pro-Trump guy. He's now the person that speaks for. They're trying to get it back. I mean, why? Let's say you and I we're just selling, I don't care, widgets, but we know that 90% of the people who buy our widgets believe in the man on the moon. So you and I do a whole big huge ad campaign that says there's no man on the moon. Why? That's the better question. Why are you so stupid that you want to knock the person who has been buying your widgets out of the box? Arthur?
I apologize. I don't get the correlation. Again,
that's convenient. That's convenient not to get it. But the people who bought the product, who buy the product, who've been buying the product, why piss in their Wheaties?
I guess again.
Okay.
Then still beer.
All right, man. Then have a good day. Thank you. You don't get it. All right. Let's go to Nick in Denver. Hi, Nick. You're a little trick with Nick. Nick, you're on the show. Good morning.
A little tricky, Nicky. That's sometimes.
Anyway, I don't get it. What do you mean you don't get it?
I can only offer one reason why Budweiser did that. They were pressured by the higher-ups to be more, shall we say, with it and more woke and all that, and they decided to do that, and it backfired. It's that simple.
And there you go. Why?
That's simple.
Here's your target demo. Here is your guys. These are the people that since 1912 have been putting money in your pocket. Let's call them idiots.
That's right. And they wanted to be more woke and more with it and all that stuff. And thank God it backfired on
Now, number two. That was Bud Light. Why then would Harley Davidson repeat the stupidity of Bud Light?
I probably the same reason,
Thank you.
And they don't realize that their audience are not those kinds of people.
Yeah,
period.
it's like taking this radio station that skews to the right and giving it to it doesn't matter, but say here's your show, and they're going to leave, or I don't know, but the proof in the pudding was, first of all, Ronald Reagan, who nobody wants. I'm going to write about this big deal, but Ronald Reagan protected Harley Davidson. What is the word that they did? Tariffs. They imposed tariffs on the Japanese bikes. AMF got out of the motorcycle business, and the right guys got their hands on it. They built great motorcycles. End of story. You're right. I mean, it ain't that tough, is it?
No, it's not. But the thing is, and the thing about people complain about, well, Trump should be using tariffs. So my question to them is, what other tools does the president have that will get their immediate attention? Because everything else has not worked. It's
hard right now because, the market's bounding and bouncing and doing this and doing that. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not a pre-guesser on that. But the model that sings is the 1983 Ronald Reagan model. And it worked.
Yes, it did.
Well, but the other side of it, and now they put this guy out on his ear, the CEO. He had to go. You can hear people cheer.
Well, I'm sure he's not eating Fritos every day.
No, he's Eurotrash. He comes from Puma, and and it's all very. Running shoes are very politically correct, and they stick him in, and he implements this stuff, and they begin this electric bike called a Spark. I wrote it. It's faster than snot, but you can only go so far, and then you got to charge it again.
That's right. If you can't find a charging station, you're out of luck.
You're out of luck. Yeah. I mean, but I tell you what, it's quick. It's real quick. Hang on, Peter. We're gone. But I wouldn't want one. I mean, nothing to do with, I don't like the whole idea of EVs.
Well, the technology has not been perfected yet.
Well, I don't know.
It's that simple.
I like that noise. And the noise says, that Harley patented, because the Japanese were trying to make their mufflers sound like Harley mufflers and motor sound, and the noise goes, Buddha, 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 Buddha. And they had to, no, I'm not making this up. And when the Japanese were doing all this stuff to the American big bike market, they were trying to make their motors and mufflers sound Buddha, 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 the Buddha noise. No, I laughed too when I first heard it, but it's true. And they patented the tailpipe. They patented the noise, the sound.
My major complaint was that the political establishment, when they permitted all these big companies to offshore, and they did it simply because they wanted to make more money using cheap labor and all that stuff.
That's exactly what they did.
And in the process, the political system should have protected the workers in this country, and it didn't.
No, of course it didn't. And look, what these multinational corporations, look, we invented the Chinese. And this whole, I'm listening to the crap on radio that I'm going, Jesus. My grandmother would say, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Did you ever have a relative to say that? I mean, my brother.
It's been a long time.
But you've heard it, yeah. But my brother said, he thought till he was 12 years old, God's last name was Damn. He did. God's last name was Damn. It's true. But anyhow, but seriously, folks. So, I don't know. I don't know what's going to. I have no idea. Somebody said, "Well, what's going to happen?" If I knew that, but HD.
The thing.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That Trump was pushed into a corner. The economy was in terrible shape. We're $37 trillion in the hole.
Oh, yeah.
If nothing were done, the economy would have collapsed.
Where's the job for my grandson? Where are the jobs of my youth? Well, the jobs of my youth are in Beijing or Shanghai or Pakistan or someplace.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Where's Samsonite and where is Gates? They're gone.
They're gone.
So how do you get
Samsonite?
Yeah.
Wasn't that a Denver company?
Yeah, absolutely. So was Gates.
Yeah. Yes.
Gates
Yeah,
Rubber.
they're gone.
They're gone.
Yeah.
Where'd they go?
Well, they're not here. I know that.
Pakistan, Bangladesh.
Yeah, they pay him what, $1 a day, whatever.
75 cents. And no health care, no EPA.
No health care. No, nothing.
Take care of yourself. Thank you, sir. All right.
Bye-bye.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to continue in this hour, and then Professor Smith, who I think hung the moon, we're going to talk about culture. And we'll do that for a couple hours, and then we'll come back to this. But I don't know. 710 KNUS 86, the high. Stay here. king of the road. Listen to this. 944. Do-doom, there is for sale. That's Dean Martin. Roger Miller did that tune. Doom, doom. Ain't got no cigarettes. That was a great song. 86 will be the high today. We're going to be on the road a lot on the bikes today and tomorrow. 70 on Sunday and Monday, 60 degrees. We are talking about a number of different things. Harley Davidson being woke, dumping their CEO, Bud Light, Ronald Reagan protecting the motorcycles, Trump, and everything tied together. Let us go back. I think we go to Don. Don in Aurora, thank you for waiting here on the radio show. Good morning.
Good morning, Uncle Pete. How you doing, man?
My boy. I'm good, man. Thank you.
I got a question and a comment. My comment is when you said about your ratings, leave these people alone. I said, amen, brother. I said, I got to call this man.
No, thank you. Just leave him alone.
What's going on? I'm sitting here watching this madness in the Red Sea that's been going on for well over a year.
Yeah.
With the Houthis.
Yep.
This is affecting Egypt more than the United States.
I mean, yes, because they're closer.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's no.
Go ahead.
Well, if you don't have an enemy, you have to invent one, and this is a byproduct of multinational corporations, the American CIA, screwing around in the Persian Gulf. We have no fight there.
Yeah, if you try to invent an enemy, someday you can invent an enemy that smacks you in the mouth.
Well,
I mean, don't mess with these people.
Leave them alone.
These are really smart folks.
There's a great rule that I always adhere. Don't fight when you're a kid growing up. Don't fight ugly guys. They have nothing to lose. Like, remember, you try to be protecting your face a little bit when this guy's hooking at you, right?
Yeah.
Don't fight ugly people. Don't fight people that live up on tops of mountains, and don't fight people that live in jungles.
Yeah. And I got a question that's really been bothering me. I read this yesterday about they fired the guy who ran Harley Davidson.
Yes, I was so happy. I was thrilled. Yes.
I have never owned a Harley Davidson. My dad owned a Yamaha for about a minute.
Sure.
And that's about the only motorcycle I ever rode, and I had to be like 5.
Sure.
What motivated them to hire a shoe guy and a luxury goods guy to run a motorcycle company?
Exactly the right question. They had a board that was, and they threw all the original guys that bought it back out of AMF. It's totally screwed the pooch. But Willie G. Davidson, who was a scion to the Davidson family, and a bunch of other people, and they just eased them out. These are the new age, not new age, but these are the modern banker board members. And then what happened was this one guy who was a board member, he quit and left a scathing letter about what they had done. Because remember, what's important is the culture of Harley Davidson is much more than just motorcycles. And to the first caller,
it's a whole way of life.
Absolutely.
Really, think about it.
I'm going to see these guys today. I love them. I mean, when you hear the word Harley Davidson, what comes to mind? Well, the image of a powerful motorcycle roaring down the road. But Harley Davidson is much more than just motorcycles. It's a culture, and
it's very similar to Corvettes when you think about it.
Although a lot rougher trade.
That kind of goes without saying.
Yeah, you never see, 15 Corvettes pulling a bar.
No, but still, I used to listen to Rolly, and he talks about, Corvettes. It's a certain attitude. It's a certain way of looking at the world. It's a certain lifestyle.
Oh, believe me, and the motor company, and all, myself included, everybody owes the club culture in California and in the East Coast. I mean, the vests that we call cuts, the fat tires, you owe that to the 1% clubs pretty much in California, or, the builders in California. Right now, I'll tell you what, the coolest thing in the world I've seen, these Hispanic bikes, and they call them, there's a name, it means 2 wheels. And they are sometimes they're called fishtails. These bikes are way cool. I mean, culture builds. We're going to talk about it next hour. Culture builds, and I tell you what, another one is what the black guys are doing with motorcycles.
Oh, really?
I mean, it started with sport bikes, and they put NOS bottles on them and long back. We got 5 minutes, okay? And I had a talk. First time I saw him, I was in Daytona for Bike Week, and I was at my chopper, and we pulled in this place, and 4 or 5 of these kids came in. They were from Georgia, and they had extended rear ends on sport bikes, and they had NOS bottles, and the women rode with them, looked like koala bears. They get up on their back, and this kid pulls in with this bike, and I said, "That's strong." And he looked at me and said, "I like your bike too." We ended up in a parking lot talking for 20 minutes with these kids, and now they've taken baggers, and they've applied their own sense of the world, of the community, of the culture onto the bike, and that's what.
Well, some of them do it to Hispanics and lowriders.
Lowrider. Well, these really are part of lowrider culture, and
yeah, it is.
Yeah, they're. I mean, but the culture of Harley Davidson is far more than just motorcycles, and that was the thing that offended everybody when this guy gets appointed the CEO.
Yeah, is it true they were planning on building Harley Davidsons in Thailand?
Oh, Pakistan and all kinds of stuff. And remember,
it's not. I've never owned a Harley. I know if it's built in Pakistan, it's not a Harley Davidson.
Well, that was what they were trying to, get past everybody. And one of the board, one of the things about that motorcycle, and it was chosen for intent. If you go back and read the history, like the original Outlaws, that movie, the bikers, bike riders, it's right on the money.
Yeah.
And and there was guys called the Booze Fighters and the Top Hatters, and of course the Angels, and all of that West Coast stuff. And we just finished doing that Steve McQueen book. They all hung out with Steve. I mean, he had that hangar, and they came there, and Jeff Decker was a little kid getting brought there, and who's there? Sonny's there. Who's there? All of those guys. And again, Big Daddy Ed Roth is there. Von Dutch is there. That's where all the culture crosses over. And it's an amalgam. It wasn't done in the factory in Milwaukee. It was done on the street in L.A.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. Yeah, true with fashion. If you look at fashion and everything, the fashion of my youth, everything comes off or from the black community. We dressed like the black guys.
Yeah. I got one more thing. If for anybody out there, maybe you might be interested. If you really want to see something really bizarre, get on Mr. Google and type in EV graveyards China. When you mentioned about electric vehicles, that's the first thing that popped into my head. You will see pictures, just rows and rows of EVs just sitting there.
Yep. And now the Chinese are making a motorcycle that looks exactly like a Japanese Goldwing. The coolest bike that I think is made in Japan is called a Goldwing. I love it. It's a great bike.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a great bike. And the Chinese are now making one, just like it, just like it. And wait until their dealership opens up in Aurora, and then watch that.
Oh God!
I gotta go. They're yelling at me.
Okay, let's talk to you later.
Thank you, man. Talk. All right. Now, on the other side, Professor Smith comes on. We're going to talk about what actually came off the Jeff and Billy show about culture and the reason and the rise. And then we'll come back to the Harley story, and Robbie Farrell will be with us. It's riding day out there right now, brother. 86 the high. Stay here. This is Radio Free Denver, good old 710 KNUS.
Reagan, 19 years, 1 year, 1 day. 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 19 years, 1 year, 1 day
And good morning again, everybody. Boy, what a beautiful Saturday this is. This is 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles, and good morning. 86 the high today, 70 on Sunday, Monday, 60 degrees. What leads to the show is, of all things, I'm going to the dentist. I'm going to see Dr. Richter, and I'm listening, as I do in the mornings, listening to Jeff and Billy. And they start talking about this culture and everything, and then they had a guest on who began to speak about the Grimm brothers, Jacob and Wilhelm, Jack and Bill. And I spent quite a bit of time reading about the Grimms back when I was a college boy. And it wasn't as was being presented. The Grimm brothers were simply collectors of tales, of folk tales. And they crossed all over. Germany wasn't united. It's Bavaria, it's going into Germany, Prussia, and they're collecting the stories of people. And oftentimes, and because they were talking about how the Disney people were now putting out this Snow White. Well, but Walt, back in the day when they did the original Snow White, they cleaned that up pretty good too, and Hansel and Gretel and all the stories that went with it. Because more than at one time, it wasn't a witch, it was a Jew. And the culture in Nazi Germany. And so I before I entered, I guess it needs no introduction. So I'm thinking about this and posing it as a question, and I said, there were three great dictatorial empires in my lifetime: Germany, Japan, and China. How did they happen? How did Nazi Germany happen? Without further ado, he's become just a true friend. He's at Baylor University, or he's traveling now for the summer. But Dr. David Smith of Baylor University. And
hey, Peter, how you doing, buddy?
You know what? I'm real good.
Good deal.
Yeah, real deal. And I've gone back to the drawing board, and since this, and I actually called the fellows not to go on their show, but I got Jeff Hunt, who does the morning show, and with Billy Thorpe, and he said, well, let me put you on the air. And then he suddenly Googles the Grimm brothers, and he starts to look at what they've written. Woo! Mm-hmm. And and there's always this theory, and I adhere to it, that the culture in Germany helps give rise to the Nazis. And then I thought, well, let's spread it out. Lenin and Stalin, or Hirohito. And how did these... Can you think of a three greater dictatorial empires in our lifetime than those three? I can't.
No. You've got Nazi Germany. You've got Stalin and Stalin's Soviet Union. You've got Hirohito. Mm-hmm. The second tier would be Mussolini in Italy. Yes. Stuff like that. And then the South American dictators. Yes. But the 20th century has been a century of dictators.
Yes. So I turn it to you. How did Adolf Hitler happen?
Wow, it's such a complicated story. There's so many books. You can find huge books written on the rise of Hitler. It's a complicated mix of culture and politics and economic dislocation. Hitler, you're not going to get Hitler unless you have World War I end the way it does. Mm-hmm. So you can tell the story, and you can start almost at any place and get to 1933, 1935, But I would say, honestly, the key elements that bring about Hitler's rise will be the way that World War I ends, the economic dislocation in Germany, and the resentment that the German people feel, this sort of populist resentment that Hitler is able to convince the people that he is the best speaker for.
How did Lenin, and these are overviews, and we'll come back, obviously, we'll take calls. How did Lenin and Stalin happen?
Well, Lenin happened because he was one of the engineers of the Russian Revolution that overthrew the Tsar, right, in 1917. Lenin was in exile, and you know this because we've talked about To the Finland Station.
That's right.
Lenin was in exile. The German government during World War I cooked up a plan to get Russia out of the war, knowing that the war was very unpopular with with the Russian people, and the provisional government that the Tsar had allowed to come into play in March of 17 didn't take Russia out of the war. And Lenin was able to come back to Russia and put together this revolutionary cadre that overthrew the provisional government and pulled Russia out of the war. And that's how Lenin seized power. Eventually, he became the leader of that faction, and that faction eradicated its enemies. And then Lenin dies. You get a power struggle. Stalin rises to the top of that. Trotsky, who was probably the best bet for the successor to Lenin, flees the country, and Stalin clamps down on every bit of resistance, every bit of opposition, executes political rivals, executes newspaper reporters, the whole bit, and consolidates power.
Although Hirohito's there, how did Hirohito become a god?
Oh, gosh. That's got to be wrapped pretty deeply into Japanese culture, right? That's got to be, and I'm not an expert in this by any means, but there's a similarity in the way that China regards its emperor and that Japan regards its emperor, as these are expressions of heaven that have been sent down to earth to lead the people. Not completely unlike a pharaoh.
Yeah, very much so. The crown heads of Europe versus Hirohito. Who was God?
I mean, you don't have any crowned heads of Europe in the 18th or 19th or 20th century claiming to be a god at all. And even somebody like Louis XIV, this absolute monarch from the 1700s, didn't claim to be a god. He claimed to rule because God put him there.
Yes.
But it's only certain non-Western political systems that associate their emperor with the figure of a god.
But he was, and the pharaohs were. Who else? I mean,
the Chinese emperors going back to thousands and thousands of years. That's I always tell my students when we talk about divine right of kings.
Yes.
If you can say that you're a god or God wants you there, it's a pretty good conversation stopper.
One of the most, all these different schools of history, but there's a school of history that said God wills it. God gave
Absolutely.
you Israel. God did this. You still hear it now that God created the United States of America. Better yet, God got Donald Trump elected. I'm not making that up. Yeah.
No, you're not at all. It's astonishing that in this day and age you still get that sort of narrative posited as true.
You need to do more talk radio.
we need to make a regular bit of this.
We need open lines. So the of the three, I mean, the Soviet Union Russia begins as an agricultural, but Germany's industrial. How much does that play out in it?
It plays out a lot. Germany is one of the places in Europe where the Industrial Revolution sets in first. Britain, England, Scotland is another place. But on the continent, industrialization sets in Germany first. You get the rise of factories. You get factory workers. You get Karl Marx in the middle of the century looking at the German socio-political landscape and saying there's going to be trouble here. Yeah. And there's going to be trouble because of this, right? You're building an increasingly unequal society. And then you started to see workers' revolutions flare up in 1848, right, in Vienna and Berlin and Paris and places like that. And the Russians, the czars of Russia, were looking at Europe and equating industrialization with revolution. And they were saying, we don't want any part of this. We don't want to, we don't want to bring industrialization into our country like a virus and have this kind of unrest. And Russia resisted industrialization for decades, thinking it was the surest way to revolution. And then World War I happened, and Russia was, unable to keep up.
It's even fair that the Talmudic Marxists never thought that the revolution would take place in Russia. They always thought Germany or England.
You need industrial workers to carry out an industrial revolution.
Yes. Yeah.
And one of Lenin's ideas was that we can pull this off in Russia by using peasants and the army and things like that. And it happened. But I mean, then what happened was that Lenin had to try to industrialize and sort of catch the Soviet Union up to the rest of Europe, and then you get the 5-year plans and then Stalin's industrialization.
Glorious people build glorious power plant. But then when it's Mao in 49, all those guys look down, hit their nose, and they go, "You have no industrialization. You can't become a communist." And Mao becomes this agri-communism that then spreads into Vietnam and other parts of the world. So isn't it sort of one gives birth to the next one?
I think so. I think you can say that the experience here encourages a similar experience here, an experience here. Right. I don't think you would have had a communist revolution come to victory in 1949 in China had you not had the Soviet Union.
Agreed. Yeah. So, what are the similarities between these three?
Now, do you mean, when you say these three, do you mean
maybe a better question, Professor, is there a similarity between the Germans? Professor David Smith is our guest, by the way, 710 KNUS, Denver Talk Station. Is there a similarities between the Germans, the Japanese, and the Chinese?
Well, not a whole lot, but I mean, you can see some similarities in that they have very centralized governments. They have very centralized governments that invest a predominant amount of the power in one individual. And the one individual who's leading these countries, and I would say Stalin is like this too, that the person who's leading the country is not able to be questioned or challenged, and there's no legitimate opposition in existence in any of these places.
Agreed.
And that's one of the things that the United States pioneered back in the 1700s, early 1800s. This idea of a legitimate opposition was something kind of brand new.
Oh, please. I mean, Jefferson writes, and Washington speaks, and they all talk about, because the Church of England supports King George, and Jefferson's warning against national churches, warning against religion in general.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so,
Jefferson, wins election as this new political leader in the election of 1800, and the first thing he says in his inaugural address is, "We're all Federalists. We're all Republicans.
Yes.
We're all of the same cloth, even though we have different policy positions." And you don't get that kind of legitimate opposition allowed to exist in places like Imperial Germany or Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union.
One of the things that I thought, getting ready to have you with me and talk, this is one of the smartest guys I know. I love him. The Germany under Adolf Hitler is extremely nationalistic. And so there was Hitler Youth and these massive parades and rallies and widespread activities, book burnings came to mind. But if you look at they had the Hitler Youth, and they had the Red Guards, and then they had the Young Pioneers, and I mean, it seems like these activities, the pumping, the propaganda. I mean, that they had to have an enemy or enemies, and they had to keep pumping. And I don't have a good answer, but
yeah, I mean, they had to create these cultural organizations that reinforce the dominance of Hitler or of Stalin or of the party, right? It was not enough to let these expressions be simply political expressions. They had to be cultural expressions too, and people had to be indoctrinated into them.
When I think there's the Stalinists and Mao have more in common than Adolf Hitler, but as people well know, eventually these two are going to go heads on, and the Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, and it's game on. Mm-hmm. The two clash. Yeah. But the laws are, I mean, the part of it also that I consider, well, there's a similarity, is how they took the kids.
Yeah. And you mean how they indoctrinated the kids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they took them, literally took them away from their parents.
Yeah, you've got to re-educate the youth to be loyal to Stalin or loyal to Hitler.
Yes.
And above everything else. Or Mao. Yeah, it's that the leader in these centralized autocracies, the leader has to be the sole focus of loyalty for everybody.
Yes. No, it's true. It's true. If young pioneers or the Red Guard or Hitler Youth. The Hitler Youth, man, that was like poof.
It taught Nazism to young people. It turned young people into Nazis. Which had to be, had to learn that. Nobody's born a Nazi.
And soldiers. They made them soldiers.
Yeah. And I mean, it's more than that, right? Because
absolutely.
you can train soldiers, but you've got to indoctrinate Nazis.
Yes. And so they had the little kids when they're, 6, 7 years old, they start going to Hitler Youth.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, didn't Hitler say, Professor, you give them to me until they're X, and I'll give them back to you, but they're mine the rest of their lives?
I don't know for sure, but it sure sounds like something he'd say. They
knew.
Thought that.
Yeah, they knew that if we could have them early on. Well, it's Lenin's wife that runs the education system up until the time that he strokes, and Uncle Joe.
Is that right?
I
didn't know that.
Yeah, her name was Kapushka.
Is that right? I've never really even considered Lenin as a married man.
Well, he was a player, but she was a gamer. No, she was a hardcore communist, Marxist, and she ran the early education systems in Petersburg to become Leningrad. She wanted the education system. She was, she did. I mean, she was, and Uncle Joe made sure that was that. Remember that picture? He's in repose and he's all blanketed up, and she's sitting next to him reading. And he had many girlfriends, Lenin.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, he was. So she was like her. She was in on it for. She was one of the first people to find out you can't trust Joe Stalin.
It's always the wife who picks up on it first. Right?
Oh yeah, going like, no, everything's going to be fine, and Vladimir's passing away, and it'll be just like my rear end.
Oh my gosh!
How long did it take him before he's?
Gosh, I can't remember. It took him at least 3 or 4 years, right?
To solidify power. Yeah. Throw you on hold, bring you right back. Hang on. Professor Smith is with us. What is it in culture that allows things to happen? I'm Peter Boyles. This is 710 KNUS. Morning, everybody. Beautiful Saturday morning. Great guest. All's well. Saturday, 7:10, KNUS. Thanks for being here. 303-696-1971. We'll get the lines open now. We're talking about, I don't even know how to put this in a sentence other than in my lifetime, and I'm an old guy, but there were three great, although as Professor Smith points out, there were minor leaguers as well, but there are three great dictatorial empires, the Germans, the Japanese, and the Chinese. And how did it happen? How did Adolf Hitler happen? How did Mao happen? And all of them, there's a religion that runs through it. I contend that communism itself, Marxism itself, is a religion. Professor, it's all yours.
Well, I mean, religion is a rival to totalitarianism.
Yeah.
Religion is a rival to it's if you want to control a population completely, you either have to sort of take the religion over, or you have to replace religion with something. If you're trying to control the French in the 1700s, you have to control the church. You can't let the church be a rival. If you're a dictator in the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union is a totalitarian regime, it can't allow for religion to erode, right, that sense of loyalty. It's the same sort of thing about it's the same sort of impulse that leads a dictator to eliminate political rivals. You can't have a cultural rival either.
Yeah, the night of the long knives, when Hitler gets rid of all of them. Stalin gets rid of them.
Yeah, and it's interesting to ponder what communism would have been like if Marx had not been an atheist. It's wondering if you could have a Marxism without its antipathy to religion if Marx hadn't been an atheist.
Isn't there Christian socialism in Europe? Don't they?
Absolutely.
They call
Christian socialism in the United States. There was Christian socialism in the United States for years, decades, until the Cold War came along, basically.
Gene Debs?
Yeah, absolutely. Gene Debs and what's his name? The guy who wrote the Pledge of Allegiance was a Christian socialist.
That's right.
You
know what? He was a Christian socialist.
And I talk about Christian socialism to my students, and it's like I'm talking about square circles or something. They had no idea that these things could coexist.
There is a book new on the market, and I'm halfway through it, and it's entitled Reds, The Failure of Communism in America is the subtitle. But I'm always telling you stuff to read, and I'm sorry, but you got to...
You're a great source.
Well, there's a book called Chaos, and it's by this guy named Tom O'Neill. We have him on the show in May, about the Manson family, Vincent Bugliosi, and the CIA. It's I know don't discard it. I mean it is like the most bizarre, strange, well-structured thing I've read probably in a long time. But let it go. But those guys were. This book is called Reds, and it's John Reed. It's Earl Browder. It's and everybody in Hollywood's a commie. For Lucille Ball and it's great stuff. And I when I was a kid working in the mill, I read the Daily Worker. The Daily Worker was delivered every day. We read it. I read it.
Absolutely, yeah. Because there was a awareness in the workers that they had a common interest and they needed a mouthpiece for it.
Yes. So So I mean So how did Germany go from what it was to under Hitler so quickly?
Well, remember, Germany hadn't been around that long. The country called Germany was only created in 1871. Nope. Before that, there were Germanic people, there were Germans, but there wasn't a German state that encompassed all German people until 1871.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had emperor, right? They had an Emperor Wilhelm I. They had an Emperor Wilhelm II,
Kaiser Bill.
And it's only after World War I that Germany has a republic form of government sort of imposed on it, and it was weak, and it was saddled with the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah.
And for an ambitious, politician like Hitler, it was kind of easy to push it over.
It was the Weimar, and people didn't like it because it was in the city of Weimar, and people despised them. And
and Hitler also, constructed this myth that the Weimar Republic had betrayed the people and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, the stab in the back. Stabbed in the back. Yeah, no, that's sold.
It's sold. Yeah, there wasn't a long tradition of republican government in Germany at all, and the sole experience with a republic in Germany in the 1920s, Hitler said, was a dismal failure. So, here comes centralization again, and I can rescue this and no one else can.
Have you ever seen this theory that I think probably holds up, that the Russian people are not used to governing themselves, and so it's an easy skip to Putin, that, that they want the iron fist, the same as said a lot about the Arab world, that under Islam and the Arab world, that the iron fist works.
It's an interesting question, and I think that it has to do with not having a tradition of self-government at all.
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't think it's something in the people, right? I don't think people like to be bossed around, but I think that if you don't have a tradition of self-government, it makes it very easy for a strong man to come in and say, I'm in charge and only I can fix it.
That's a question that we've been talking about for a while. So the German nationalism comes about in the 1800s. You point out that Germany had the promotions of the Prussians by the Kaiser and the Prussian state, and the Germans actually, I'm a little geek about European history, but the Germans won 3 wars in quick succession. 1860s, 1870s. They're a major power in Europe. And then, of course, World War I. And they get blamed for it. Should they have been blamed for World War I, the Germans?
I tend to think not. Not.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about Woodrow Wilson a lot.
Yeah.
And we both know that Woodrow Wilson had, a catalog of problems 100 pages long. But I got to say, the one thing Wilson got right was saying that we can't go in and pin this all on Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And the British and the French said, we're going to, and you can't make us not do it. How many people have you lost, Wilson? How many people have we lost?
Lloyd George and Clemenceau.
Yeah.
And they said no.
They believed that the only stable Europe was one in which Germany had been disarmed. Mm-hmm. And Wilson said, no, you can't do this.
Yeah. I'm stumped at this because, again, coming back full circle, Professor David Smith is here. The Grimm brothers were simply collectors of these horrible, go to the phones, horrible stories, and they cleaned them up and presented them. Well, Snow White in 1938, Disney, and now they're honking at this. I guess this new Snow White film is just horrible. But I said, what the real Disney Snow White was a cleanup, and it was wonderful. I mean, the history of that is just incredible. But
all those old folk tales, they were meant to be cautionary tales for children. They were meant to be.
That's right.
They were meant to teach lessons about what happens when you go out in the woods.
Yeah, sure.
And they all wind up with somebody getting eaten by a wolf or worse.
Or worse.
And exactly, yeah. It's because you have to be taught not to go into the woods by yourself.
That's right.
They have such deep roots back into the Middle Ages. it's an incredible sort of handing down of culture.
Are there, and again, coming back to my question, and we'll go to the calls, are there more things similar or more things not similar between these three, Germany, Japan, and the PRC?
That's a really interesting question, and I like questions like that. That's the kind of question I like to ask my students. Is it more similar or is it more different? And I think that basically, and I would throw the Soviet Union in there too, right? I would throw the Soviet Union in there with Japan and China and Germany.
Okay.
And I would say...
I should have. I think I did that on one side and then not on the other. Apologize.
Yeah. The big similarity, the real key similarity is that they're all totalitarian regimes that have force at the middle of their existence. How
much time we got before a break? Can we take calls? We're good? Let's start with Jim in Littleton, okay? Jim in Littleton, you're on 710 KNUS special guest, my friend David Smith. Good morning.
Good morning, Peter. Hey, I was just going to chime in. You were talking about the youth of the various, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. My wife actually was with me at what they call the Young Pioneers, which is in the Soviet Union.
Sure.
And they would take them off for the summer, and they would. I think she equated them more with being similar to the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
There was some political indoctrination, obviously, but it wasn't in the 60s. It wasn't as, probably the same as it was before then.
Did she have the red scarf?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
They had all of that.
Yeah.
They would do marching.
Oh, yeah.
And they would do community activities. Like they would go for the summer and they would be harvesting wheat as a group.
Now, the Hitler...
And they would do things like... Go ahead.
Hitler Youth did exactly the same thing, and so did the Red Guard.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, but in the Soviet Union, that's the way they handled it. And she said that they got much more out of the community, being a community, by doing that in the summers, and it actually levelized. You had some people that were more affluent, even in the Soviet Union, and at that time, their kids had to go as well. So everybody was treated the same in that environment. So you didn't have any kids, singled out as not having to do the chores, not having to harvest the wheat. They all had to do it. And my wife basically said it was a good experience as a whole. One thing I will say to you, because my wife was at the time of the transition from the Soviet Union to, the republic, semi-democracy. I don't think you're fair from the point of view of Russians wanting a strongman. The reason, if you look at Boris Yeltsin...
No, but it's not my theory. Stop. It's not my theory. It's a theory I've read and presented it to the professor. But
well, I would think you need to bring a professor on. His name is Jeffrey Sachs. He was instrumental in Eastern Europe transitioning to democracy. And he was brought into the Soviet Union to do the same, and the same resources were not granted to Russia that were given to Poland. When that happens, this is what happens. Russia became like Chicago. I mean, with the gangsters and all that, because they did not have the support of transitioning from these big corporations owned by the state into the private. And so it just went really haphazard, and this is why you had the oligarchs. It was not fair. And I guarantee you that the Soviet Union, if they would have done it right, we wouldn't have a Putin right now. We would have somebody else. And Boris Yeltsin was good up to the point when he became an alcoholic and corrupt.
Yeah, he's not.
Okay.
He's not the model I think I point to say, had he hung around, things would be different. Professor, respond please. Your take on the call.
No, I think his points are well taken. That the Soviet Union, after Stalin's death, into the 1950s, into the 1960s, as he was talking about, was a very different place than it was under Stalin. And you could have organizations like the Young Pioneers pursuing more, let me say it this way. You could have an organization like the Young Pioneers that pursued political indoctrination far less than it did earlier. And the Young Pioneers did things exactly like he said, that they served as an outdoor group. They very much like the Boy Scouts. But when you look at it from the outside, you see the echoes of Stalin still existing. You just sort of presume that it's still this radical indoctrination thing.
Put the Red Guard in there and put the Hitler Youth in there. Where do they match up?
I don't think I would I don't equate the Hitler Youth with the Young Pioneers. I think the Young Pioneers, I wouldn't want to compare them to the Hitler Youth, because the Hitler Youth was designed expressly to cultivate Nazi ideology and loyalty to Hitler within children, and the Young Pioneers had certain things under Stalin, but the Young Pioneers could cultivate things that weren't megalomania like the Hitler Youth did.
Of the three, because I'm close to the break, of the three, is there one worse than the others?
What's the third?
Well, you got the Red Guard, you got the Young Pioneers, and you got the Hitler Youth.
I think the Hitler Youth, within the context of a young people's organization, was far more corrosive to the youth than the Young Pioneers were.
We're going to take the turnaround and come back. Professor Smith is with us. I'm Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS. 86 the highs, 70 tomorrow. Motorcycles are outside. Hang on. There you go. Saturday, everybody. Bikes outside, 303-696-1971. This is 710 KNUS. Professor David Smith, Peter Boyles together again. 86 the high, 70 tomorrow. And tell you about my friend David Ellis, the man. You've heard me talk about talking to David, taking your valuables to David. Boy, the market is all doing which way and the other, but watch gold's running up. Get a fortune in cash and secure an appraisal from David and all the valuables that you have tucked away in your home. It's all true. Share the same reason to see David. Just in case you don't have a Rolex watch, or rare coins, or a silver tea set. See David for all of the most meaningful gift-giving occasions. David Ellis's jewelers are just the right item, just the right price. Special people that mean the most: an antique watch, emerald pendants, gold necklaces, diamond rings. The trusted jeweler's been buying precious metals and antiques in Colorado for decades. I've known him a long, long, long time, and been the great opportunity to speak for David. Dazzling cases filled with hundreds of new and used pieces your loved ones will treasure. Visit David Ellis. See for yourself. Again, gift-giving season's coming up. They got graduations, and then, of course, rolls into people getting into weddings. Look for the black awning on the corner of 3rd and Clayton and Cherry Creek. Explore davidellisjewelry.com or visit my friend David or call him 303-322-8779. 3rd and Clayton and Cherry Creek, 303-322-8779. Tell David I sent you. Our guest is from Baylor University. Of course, he has been a wonderful guest for us for so many years, Professor David Smith. And this occurs, I'm listening to Jeff and Billy, and a guy comes on, starts talking about the Grimm brothers, and it's pretty clear to me that he, with all due respect, he has no idea what the Grimm brothers were about, or better yet, what their discoveries were that led to so much of an anti-Semitism. So I'll come back to Professor Smith. Freud always talks about what lies beneath. And all of this stuff was lying there. And
you mean sort of a low-grade cultural anti-Semitism that had been around since the Middle Ages?
Yeah, I don't even think it's low grade. I think it just is.
Yeah, well, compared to what it blew up into in the Nazi regime, it was low grade.
Yeah, but did it give life to it or give rise to it?
Yeah, it was like Hitler was able to tap into these old ancient prejudices in Central Europe that went back hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yes.
And that, I mean, tapping into ancient prejudices is sort of a playbook for dictatorial regimes.
Yes.
You got to have an enemy, right? You've got to have.
If you don't,
you've got to construct an enemy, and then you've got to get the people more mad at that constructed enemy than they are at their current conditions.
Yes, absolutely. Do you think that? And they all three are in very horrible economic shape when the Bolsheviks push the Mensheviks out, when Mao begins his rise, and certainly, Germany's in trouble and been in trouble when Hitler begins his run. Are there similarities there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about China. Mao, gained power in China in 1949, but there had been a civil war going on in China since the 20s.
That's right.
And China as a political entity had been, racked with instability since the 1920s and a civil. I mean, it was like the United States in the 1860s, and then Japan invaded in 1937, and the Civil War is sort of put on hold. But once Japan was defeated in 1945, the Civil War just flared back up again, and finally it ended with Mao and the Chinese Communists winning. But yeah, it's all of these places. The Soviet Union in 1917 to 1922, right, that era. Hitler's Germany, China, all of those came about because of enormous amounts of instability in the country.
I read, all the Hinton stuff, like, Red Star over China, Fan Chen. There was a book, Iron Ox, what the Chinese called tractors, the Iron Ox. And these were books written after 49 Red Star Over China was written in the caves on the Long March, but the other ones were, Fan Chen is Chinese for turnaround. And all these books that were, and they said, and I've often used this on the show, that in this tariff war right now, jumping to where we are now, Mao's biggest problem in 1949 and 1950 wasn't the Americans, it wasn't the Soviets, it was feeding these people, getting them something to eat.
Yeah, I mean, there had been famine and terrible conditions in China for a long, long time. And remember, 1949 is only 4 years removed from the end of World War II.
Yes.
When China was just absolutely brutalized for years. So, yeah, absolutely. The need to feed the people, the need to have a working society that can, grow its own food, all these things. And basically, China was a peasant, like you said, a peasant-based agricultural society that was a long way from being an industrial powerhouse.
And Stalin's looking down his nose, although he helps, but he doesn't think anybody can do it in an agri-economy. Mao proves
Stalin just wants to use the Chinese to give the Americans a hard time.
That's it, absolutely.
Yeah, Stalin doesn't care whether they're communist or not, but it would help because it would help him manipulate them. But all he wants out of China is for them to give the Americans trouble.
He said that communism would fit the Chinese like a saddle fits a cow. he didn't think it could be done. But Mao gives birth to Ho Chi Minh and those guys, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, Ho Chi Minh was a Vietnamese nationalist since before World War II.
Sure.
But, and Mao, as the leader of this revolutionary movement that has just come to power, is in no position to turn down help from anybody. And the Soviet Union jumps in there and says, oh, we'll help you. But they're doing it for geopolitical reasons and not for the brotherhood of man reasons. That's
for any stretch. Any stretch. And then one more, and then we'll go to the phones. Lines are jammed. MacArthur saves the emperor.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I was writing stuff down last night. I said, well, you go on with David Smith. You better get ready. And
I think the same thing about you. I'm going to be on Peter, so I need to get my books in order.
Oh, man. But everybody in Toland's book, the emperor should have stood trial. I mean, he should have stood trial.
And Truman agreed to save the emperor too, right? Truman agreed that the unconditional surrender with Japan could be conditional in that they can keep the emperor. And Truman understood that. And trying to decide MacArthur's relationship with Japan from 45 to 50 is really sort of like what William Manchester called him. Remember, American Caesar?
American Caesar, that's right. Yeah. Hell of a book, by the way. Just great book.
It's a great book. It's a great work of biography.
Yeah. And boy,
does it makes you annoyed with MacArthur. That's for sure.
It makes you, who he is. It's like you make him. Sidebar, and it's much minor league, but this new book on Steve McQueen, as an actor, he's great. He's king of cool, but boy, his private life, he's rough.
1 minute. Oh wow,
he's really rough. Wait, they're telling me 1 minute, so let me throw you up on hold. He's going to come in the next hour. We'll come right out of the box with the calls. Good morning, everyone. 710 KNUS. Professor David Smith from Baylor is with us. We're talking about culture and the dictatorial empires. We'll go back to talk about the model of Harley Davidson this week, dumping its CEO, who is very woke, what all of that means as well. So it's beautiful outside. 86 will be the high. 48 tonight. Still get outside. 70 on Sunday. And back to work Monday, 60 degrees. Hang on to your hats. We ready to go? We're right back after this. Morning, everybody. It is a Saturday, 710 KNUS, Denver's talk station. I'm Peter Boyles. Good morning. It is the show. 303-696-1971. Guest of the decade, Professor David Smith, is with us. 86 the high, 70 on Sunday, 60 on Monday. Our topic, and it comes off a spin-off of Jeff and Billy, about culture and the rise of what comes from it, including religion and everything that goes with it. And David Smith, kind enough to stay into the second hour. I promised we'd go right back to the calls, so let's start. We go to Chris. That's who's fired? Chris, you're on the radio show. Professor David Smith is our guest. Thank you.
David, I'm seeing a lot of corollaries between, I don't want to say like neo-Nazism, but people like Richard Spencer have, told everyone that he would be okay with socialism if he had like a white ethno-state. A lot of people associate racism with right-wing republicanism, but do you think that a racist would be okay with a left-wing apparatus, as it were, so long as it
What's the point? Come here. Listen, please. Just for Chris, what is the question? Stop and give me a question.
Do you think that racists would be okay with socialism?
Wide open question. All right.
That's a big question, right?
Yeah, there it is. All right. Would racists be okay with socialism?
Well, from what I can tell, racists really tend to disapprove of things that benefit everyone equally. And the underpinning of socialism is that it tries to eradicate, eradicatable inequality. So it's interesting to sort of blend the two together. But I mean, racists are racists, and socialism is a political system.
But at the same time, when guys like Joseph Stalin, what they do to Ukrainians, or what they do to they themselves to Jews, or I mean, if they claim one thing, and and my God, the Maoists, what they've done to what they did in Tibet. And I mean, good. I'm sorry, I pulled you down. Yeah, but I see it.
I mean, Stalin, and you and I have talked about this before, right? Stalin was a dictator first and a communist only second or third.
Yeah, right.
And the National Socialists of Nazi Germany were no more socialists than the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics were republics.
No, it was about blood and soil, and the party was initially the National Socialist one. Actually, most people believe Hitler was a spy, and went into the party. And
I mean, the party structure existed, and the Nazis just took it over. Yeah, and they didn't have to make their own party from scratch. They just used this party that was an opposition party within the system.
So when I hear talk radio, and they always remember they were socialists, and I just want to call them up and say, what have you read?
Yeah, they weren't. No, they weren't. They weren't socialists.
No,
they were
not.
Fascists.
And the socialism part of it, if you can come anywhere from it, is blood and soil. That unified them. They invented a past. They had knights and all this stuff. Siegfried. They invent this Wagner, and they're using And although Hitler loves Wagner and actually, I guess, had a relationship with his sister, that they love all this stuff. The Flight of the Valkyries, that's them. Siegfried,
yeah. It allows them to root themselves in the mythic past. I was having a conversation about this with someone here just recently about the whole mythology of Vikings that, as we think of Vikings, is a creation of like the 19th century.
That's right. And they actually, there's an SS division called Viking.
Yeah, it's all about building a cultural system through which you can exclude people and make them the other and the enemy.
And there was something called the Thule Society that it was Blavatsky and all of these people. They invented. And it's interesting because I'm a fan of C.S. Lewis. I'm a fan of these guys, but they also invent these. The Lord of the Rings is an invention of Tolkien. He invents.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, and please don't misunderstand me, but he invents these people, invents this language, I mean, they were just pretty amazing characters.
Yeah, I mean, especially Tolkien created such a vivid world because he made it so deep, and he invented languages and he invented mythologies. And only then, after he did all that, then he wrote the books that drew on these invented mythologies. But I mean, what Hitler did was try to root his movement in this ancient mythic past from which he drew power and the ability to cast people as an enemy.
And he has a very wicked weapon, Joseph Goebbels.
Yeah, propaganda is central to controlling people.
Yeah. The emperor is divine, and Hitler is given. He's brought to you by God, and
and you're not allowed to question it.
Never.
No,
never.
There's no loyal opposition in a centralist regime.
All right, let's go next to Frank in Denver. Frank, you're on the radio show. Our guest is always Professor David Smith.
Morning, Dr. Smith. I always enjoy it when you come on with Peter. You guys have such interesting conversations. I got a kick out of your response to that question before that said you like questions with a little bit of this and a little bit of that. That sort of tells me that you live in a world of grays.
That's probably true. I probably have a little bit more gray in my life than most people do.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. I just didn't appreciate that much. A lot of my history teachers always are presenting history as this is the way it was back when and when, but I think that just probably shows that they don't know as much in detail about what was really going on, because it is life is a world of grays. You know, my two questions to you is one question I kind of picked up from Billy and Jeff is it sort of seems to me that totalitarian systems seem to come out of or are produced by these mass populations who are in stress or poverty or uneducated or less educated, and that they need the strong man to say, I can fix this, the simple answer. Is that something you agree with?
I agree with that being the story that's told to the masses. I think you're spot on accurate. I think they come out of distressed societies, and I think you get someone who then says to that distressed society, you need me because I'm the one who can bring order to this system. And I'm the only one who could. Order isn't going to be able to come from the system itself because it's too messed up, like you said. And the strong man, the dictator, says, I'm the only one who can bring order to this system. And and you get people to follow you.
Backed up by a good propaganda system.
Exactly.
Peter, for a second, if in history there's always different theories of history. One of them is from Carlyle. This is by the way, Adolf Hitler adhered to this. It's called the Great Man Theory. And Adolf Hitler adhered to the Great Man Theory, and i.e. him. And I think that's, Frank, what you're kind of saying is, but the theory is called the Great Man Theory. The great men do this, And
and like you said, that's a simplification of history.
Yes.
It's a whole lot grayer than that, but you can, you get that in American schools too. George
Absolutely.
Washington,
That's right.
Abraham Lincoln, and it's not to tear these people down. You don't want to tear down Abraham Lincoln, but it's a simplistic view of history that says these great people come along and they fix everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question I want to ask you, I don't know what your opinion is on what Trump is doing now with the tariffs, but to me it seems like he's forced into all these positions of having to do this, which our Congress and our politicians en masse are not willing to do and should have done 20 years ago. I told Jeff and Bill the other day that, the Chinese were taking our Beanie Baby money and making battleships out of them, and that cannot be allowed to continue if it becomes an existential threat.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting to have a conversation about tariffs in the United States in 2025 because we've become such a consumer-driven culture and a consumer-driven economy since the early 1900s. And if you go back into the 1800s, tariffs worked in a producer-centric economy. Mm-hmm. But tariffs in a consumer-centric economy like we are, they don't have the effect that people who back them think they will.
We have become, after the multinational strip, the means of production. The jobs of my youth go to Shanghai or Beijing or Pakistan. Then they flip the script. And this thing is so, let's right the ship, because FDR's arsenal of democracy that literally saves the world. It really does.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that when we talk about that type of mentality of the current American public, it's a want society. And what brought us out of World War II, and one World War II was a give society. What can we give? What can we contribute to the arsenal of democracy to defeat
they sold it. It was, they got deals for it. But that's who they are, and that's how it worked. And
Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country can do for you; ask what you can do for your country."
That's right.
That's a selfless mentality that's vanished from the landscape.
Way vanished. We talked about that the other day. That when Kennedy was sworn in, and it was inspiring. He was Catholic, he was Irish, it was all this kind of stuff. And you're going, whoa, wait a minute. You don't know the truth, but you're going like.
I don't want to keep asking too much questions.
One more.
Yeah, Dr. Smith, do you feel that the threats to us are outside existential threats more, or internal existential threats from the left and their anti-conservative or anti-patriotic American policies?
Where is the greatest threat coming from to the United States? I don't think it's the domestic left. It's probably serious economic rivals like China and expansionist political regimes that want to take advantage of America withdrawing as a stabilizing order in the world.
Watch it. It's all happened before, has it not, Professor?
Yeah, I mean, you look back at the British, in the 1800s, they wanted a stable world to have their empire, and it cost them. They had to work to produce a stable world, and they benefited from it. And the United States benefited immensely from the world that it helped create after World War II. And it takes a lot of work to be a great power. It takes a lot of work to be a superpower.
And it takes a lot of work to be an empire.
Yeah, if you want a stable world, you have to invest in it.
But do all empires fail?
Do all empires fail?
I believe they do. Eventually.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you have sort of like a rise and fall of the great powers idea as your base, there's a lifespan, right? The rise and fall of great empires is a phrase that has a lot of validity to it.
We saw the Soviets go, and what's happened with that. I mean, we are an empire. The United States of America is an empire, and it's very very fragile right now.
Yeah, I would say we've been an empire in some senses since the middle of the 1800s.
I agree. Since the last book you wrote about Dewey was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was a book, the book about empire.
The Rise of the American Empire. And when you think about it, look at the Chinese empires of hundreds of years ago. They would have a lifespan of literally hundreds of years. Oh,
but I'm kind of a geek about it. They were not expansionist. In other words, the Chinese don't fight expansionist wars.
No, they're very insular.
Thank you. I mean,
traditionally they have been.
Yeah. I'm going to jump. Thanks for your call. Let's go to you do it. Let's go to line 2. I think is our next call. Is it Inga? Inga, you're on a radio show. Ginga, you're on a radio show. Our guest, a very special Professor David Smith.
Yes, I'm enjoying listening to you, Professor Smith. This is Gunga. But anyway, okay. I was wondering what's your opinion about this. Do you think Trump's a dictator, or would he? I think or he just wants to be one.
Well, he's certainly not too keen on opposition, is he?
No, not at all. Other opinions. It's his way or the highway. So, yeah.
I was listening to one of the White House spokespeople talking about the setup of the Iranian negotiations, and the message was, we'll invite the Iranians in and we'll tell them how it's going to be. That's not really a discussion.
No, that's not. It's one-sided. Yeah, I was thinking, is he a dictator or a tyrant? I mean, you've got to think.
Just let me interject before people begin to sit down and talk. Everybody said it's like a prize fight. Everybody shoots their mouth off. But it looks as though they've already given concessions to the Iranians. The Iranians aren't fools.
No,
this isn't
not at all.
No, you watch your step.
Right.
And I think
when you also can't believe what they. I mean, we know from past experience they do change. They say one thing and then another thing happens.
So do we.
We do too.
We do too. But remember that when John Kerry, the professor, we're coming up on our break. When John Kerry walked in that room, the Iranians had him at hello.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah. This isn't who. I mean, I'm a kind of a little reader about these guys and a bit of a traveler. If you think for a second that this is not some sophisticated bunch, the mullahs and others in Iran, you're dead wrong.
Right. Yeah, they know what they want. They know what they need.
Absolutely.
They know the international order very clearly.
Absolutely.
Right.
These aren't fools. And toying with them. Hang on. We're put the professor on hold, everybody. We have one line open, 303-696-1971. And culture, religion, where are we going? 710 KNUS. 11:23, everybody, on a Saturday morning. Great weather. Be on the bike here in just about an hour and a half. 710 KNUS with Professor David Smith as our guest. Beautiful day, 86 the high, 70 on Sunday. Monday, it's going to be 60 degrees. We're sort of all over the boards, but really, how did these empires, the dictatorial empires, come into existence? Germany, the Japanese, the PRC, the Soviets. These are the empires of my lifetime. How did Hitler become Hitler? How did Adolf Hitler happen? How did Mao happen? How did Stalin happen? And Professor David Smith is with us from Baylor. Before we go back to the phones, anything you want to catch up on, Professor, and then we'll jump to the calls.
Oh no, not at all. I'm just loving this. This is great. I appreciate people taking the time to call in and being curious and wanting to know stuff. It's just, all of what we do, you and me both, depends on people being open and wanting to learn. It really does.
I think you're right. I think there's a role that this business should play, but rarely anymore does.
Yeah.
But we'll go to Evan in Denver, who waited the longest. Evan, you're on the radio show. Thank you. And our guest, of course, is Professor David Smith.
Hey, Pete, really great show today. Gives me a good excuse to delay doing my taxes, but it's too much fun talking about this stuff.
Thank you.
Really great show. I only have limited and spotty knowledge of European history. That includes England, but I've ruminated for a long time because I am partially of German descent about the, shall we call it, the disaster of World War II and the Nazis. And the conclusion I've come to, and I'd be curious to see what you gentlemen think because you're quite learned on the subject. My conclusion sort of is that the Europeans, unlike the Americans, which I will call us, never gave up tribalism. In other words, they still see themselves as part of a small living group. And if we look at our own Indian population or indigenous populations in this country, there's always a chieftain. And the chieftain basically is some sort of a warrior, cultural leader. And I don't think the Europeans have given up. Hence, Charlemagne always failed. Ursula von der Leyen seems to have arisen as the queen of Central Europe, but that's sort of my simple-minded conclusion on.
All right, let's give it to Professor. Sir, it's yours.
Tribalism is a quality of humanity. I don't think it's a quality of Europe alone. I think what tribalism boils down to is the comfort that one gets from being around people that are of their family, whether it's intellectual or blood, right? And tribalism, whether it exists in the United States or in Europe or in the Middle East or wherever it exists, it's about who's in the group and everybody else being the outside. And tribalism is hard to overcome, but if you're going to have a multicultural society, a society made up of different cultures and different people, tribalism is a threat to that.
The growth,
wherever it exists.
Yeah, this is Peter. The growth from the single family, roaming the Kilhari or whatever it is that they're doing, all the way to the creation of the city-state, all the way to the creation of the nation-state, when finally people get the smart idea that the divine right of kings or the despots were. It's a long stretch, but it always kind of extends from a family, does it not, Professor?
Yeah, that's sort of like the notion that the family is the building block of society.
Yeah.
And the people who are not outside your family cannot become members of your family. No. But you can certainly be open to people who are outside and not look at people as a threat.
It's true.
And tribalism tends to, not always, but tribalism tends to result in people not of your group being seen as a threat.
And when you go to war and you capture the other members of the tribe, you don't try and bring them into your tribe. You make them slaves.
Yeah, that's historically speaking, right?
Yeah. So, final comment, Evan. Final comment.
No, I think that's pretty darn accurate.
Really good call. Really good call.
You gentlemen having a good look at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We go to Ken's next in Aurora. Ken, you're on the radio show. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yeah, Peter and your guest. I just had two comments. One is on this tariff thing. I heard on Kaplis' show last night, he said there was a congressman on from the Western Slope, and he was talking about our tariffs. Should Congress assert more and do more? And my thinking was and is, I don't care who handles the problem. I don't care if it's the Department of Fish and Wildlife or, the parking police. It's been languishing forever, and I'm not saying that the complexion of history hasn't changed from basically these trade things being about commodities to consumerism. The new map of commerce is what it is, and I think it's high time that this be addressed. And then secondly, my other comment was...
Let's take them one at a time, but if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right. Professor, your thoughts.
I'm not really hearing a question exactly, but it certainly is the case that over time, the economies have evolved. Every country's economy evolves, and our country has evolved economically in ways that have allowed some basic economic inequalities to go unchecked. And that is a way of, and because of that, you've got some pretty serious problems that need to be addressed. So I think the caller is absolutely right about not having tackled certain problems that have developed in the past 30 or 40 years.
And the rise of the multinational corporation that is colonialism in reverse. And
it's really complicated, but it's right. These multinational corporations are things that people like Thomas Paine and Karl Marx and stuff warned against. Right?
Of course they did. Sunshine Patriots and Winter Soldiers. He's an American. Truly.
Yeah, and people like we mentioned Debs earlier, right?
Yes.
Debs thought that workers' organizations had to be international because if they weren't international, the corporations would just go from place to place and they get the best exploitative deal. They absolutely did.
When the jobs of my youth, and this is something I had a long conversation, the jobs of my youth are now in Shanghai or Beijing or I don't know, someplace, I don't know where they are, but they're not in Pittsburgh and they're not. So when a young kid comes out of high school like I did, 17 years old, I wasn't going to go to college. I went to the mill and the mill hired me. And so when young kids in Denver came out of school and they weren't going to go to college, there was Gates, there was Samsonite. They're gone. They're probably in, I don't know, someplace else. So there's some other kid, but when he goes in, they don't worry about the EPA. They don't worry about unions. They don't worry about health care. You get on a list of things. The profit is the flag. There is no nationality. There's no sense of self. It's just, and this is my prediction. It's going to make I've gotten some nasty comments. The Waltons now own the Denver Broncos. And one of the games that multinationals play, especially with means of production, play in the third world, they ask for this, and this. You don't want to give it to us? Fine. There's another third world country over here that will. And they're going to do it with a football stadium. You want to give us a new football stadium? No. Okay, well, then this other city will. I mean,
it's like pitting these people against each other.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, we bought into the gospel of deregulation so thoroughly, it allows the corporations to pit groups against each other.
Sure, but they do it more outside the country. Do you want this electric melt furnace in Shanghai, or do we take it to someplace else?
Yeah, what municipal government will give us the biggest tax break to put it there?
So this is what these wealthy people do with their sports franchises. You don't want to do this for us? Hey, we're out of here.
Yeah, we'll take it someplace else.
And gladly they will receive us. And so watch the Walmart, Sam. They've done this in the third world since the late 40s. But watch them do it. I mean, I got some nasty remarks about that, but they're going to do it.
Peter, am I still on?
Yes, you are.
Well, I remember 40 years ago taking economics. That was the thing then. Russia, they'll go into somewhere that they want a partnership in Africa, Latin America, or wherever, and say, hey, we'll put in a railroad or a highway.
That actually happened. It was the Chinese. It was the railroad.
They do that. They're doing that now all over Africa.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but if you're a dirt poor country somewhere and somebody offers you something, right now you might have 100% of nothing, barely eking out a living. So when they offer you something that can get your economy going, then that's the thing that these dictators want.
And the Chinese don't seem to want anything to do it. Where the Americans or they wanted to entrench inside, and the Chinese present themselves as, no, just build a road and we'll profit from it. And I don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent, but things come back to Professor Smith. Things are really in a bag right now, are they not?
It seems certainly that people who are worried about the situation in the world are justified in their worry.
Yes.
And the United States used to do things like build a dam in Egypt, right? The Aswan Dam.
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
We used it as a way to expand our influence. But and then build a railroad, build a dam, build a canal, whatever you want to do. As long as we get to use it, we'll take advantage of it. Build a football stadium, build a factory.
Oh yeah, I mean, or by the way, you want to be dictator, we will supply you under PL 480 with weaponry, uniforms. One of the things that IBM got caught back in the worst of apartheid in South Africa, they were making the cards that the Cape Coloreds or Negroes or whomever, you had to have an ID card. Jumping Forward was IBM. They made them. They made the machines that and remember the stuff on Nestel where they had they were multinational. Unilever, I think, is the multinational, and they had all those women in sub-Saharan Africa, and they did advertising about formula, and it ended up that the milk dried up on the mothers because they were buying. Yeah, people died. I mean, it was like the one thing about the multinational, and there's a great book entitled Sovereignty at Bay, and the multinational flies no flag.
Yeah, it's looking out for themselves, looking out for their own interests, and countries buy into it.
Oh yeah, well they keep guys on the throne.
Peter, my second comment, I'd like to hear what you guys have to say, is like with Iran and Afghanistan, again, another problem that's been allowed to languish. We've emboldened our enemies with poor, malfeasant, negligent strategies. And I don't think it takes rocket science. Trump, in my opinion, whether people love him or hate him, he wants peace through strength, and he doesn't want America to be taken advantage of. And again, I think that I don't care if it's the Boy Scouts that handle it or Trump. Let's just figure it out do what makes sense for our model of an economy, try to make peace with them, and strike a deal that works for both people.
Because of time. What I listen to talk radio and people start talking about all these nefarious deep state. I was going, no, this stuff was done. Do you agree, Professor, that this stuff was legitimately step by step, inch by inch, just done?
Yeah, and usually in the open.
Very much so.
It's little steps have increasingly cumulative effect.
Yes, they do.
And if you're only focused on your little steps, you can be blind to where it's going.
And if you can't figure out the wars are being fought for exactly those reasons, all these senseless, useless, expensive, for precisely those reasons. Thank you for your call. Professor's on hold. 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles. And also coming up, we're going to talk about Harley Davidson on the other side of this. That's a really fascinating story. And it was about how Ronald Reagan saved them. And what did he do? Tariffs. 710 KNUS. Hang on. Morning, everybody. Almost time to say good afternoon. 710 KNUS, 303-696-1971 with a line open. 86 will be the high, and on Sunday, 70. Did you ever, before we go back to our guest, and I love Adam, he can pull this stuff out. You ever kick into where there's a song just running through your head? You don't know where it came from. You know, where I've had a really interesting week with ending with some tremendous news and some changes and a lot of different stuff. So I'm a kid, and this is like there's backdrop music to your childhood. And I worked in a pool room, and for whatever reason, the Coasters, and they were called the Coasters because they came from the West Coast, and they picked up the name the Coasters. They were originally called the Robins, and then they become, and the lead singer is a guy named Cornell Gunther. And thousands of years later, Bob Lee and I meet them, and it was on the level. They did a song called Idol with a Golden Head. This has to be summer 1956. I'm working in a pool room. 3, 2, 1, please hit this song. With the golden head of my bed, big idol with the golden head. I began to pray. I can see it right now. Where's Bigfoot May? So the idol's been dancing with Bigfoot May. See? Is that the best? Hold on, Jim. He finds out that the idol's been dancing with Bigfoot May. Great big idol with the gold. So, thank you, Adam. Just give me that. I've been walking around singing the open. My kids look at me like, what are you doing? I said, that's music. Summer of 1956. I bought myself an idol with a golden head. Our guest, Professor David Smith, I apologize. And it's like,
no, that's great.
Yeah, no, I think that's the stuff that makes it. I think what destroyed the Soviet Union, I think, was the Beach Boys and drag racing and, jazz and fast cars and
there you go.
Levi's, and that's the stuff they wanted. They didn't want glorious people build glorious airport. They didn't want to do that. I think they wanted to be us.
American soft power is a very powerful thing.
People don't want it in. I mean, I had the chance to go to the first Gulf War. Saudi Arabians, whoo, they didn't want that music. And what the military broadcast, not what the GIs, because they had their own means of playing tapes and whatever CDs.
Yeah.
They picked the music that was being played by Army Air Force networks over the Gulf. They picked the music. The Saudis did, or had input on what was going to play. I
mean, that's totalitarianism, right? You want to control every element.
Everything about it.
You want the culture to be reinforcing you. You don't want the culture to be drifting the people away from you.
Oh my heavens, no! And that's why, the Fuhrer and even Mao. But when they were so poor with Mao, they didn't put the radios out. When they did, they would put one in a commune, and people would gather at night. And I've been in those museums, and I think you and I talked about it once in Nuremberg, and you saw the Fuhrer radios that were they were literally given to family units, and they only had one channel.
Exactly. There you go. You give them a radio, and they say, "Thanks to the radio, but all you can listen to on the radio is me."
Joseph Goebbels.
Yeah, controlling the message.
And wasn't it Stalin after Barbarossa, the invasion, that Stalin freezes up and can't do anything for a couple of days, and then finally comes on the air, and of course Hirohito was never heard on the air, was he?
Right, exactly, until the very end.
Very end. I find
and everybody just freaked out because they had never heard the emperor's voice before,
right.
And now he was telling them to surrender.
I don't know if I told you this when I read this, that was a recording, even though people thought it was live, that the night before they made a record of Hirohito talking. and they hid it with the courtesans. They hid it with the women. They hid the record. And when these young Turks came along that were going to, they thought that people were controlling the emperor, and they were trying to stop the surrender. And they but they could not go into the courtesans. They could not go into the geishas. And that's where they hid the record and played it the next day. Privy Seal played it the next day.
I've not heard that story. That's a fascinating story.
Yeah, it's new stuff, and I got to get a life. I got to get a life. I'm more fascinated with reading that than I am other stuff. But they hid.
History's where it's at. History explains everything.
Absolutely.
You know history, you'll know everything.
I think so too. I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Talking about the radio. I'm teaching a course on the presidency now, and we're listening to Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chat.
The best.
And how they're just incredible, and how revolutionary they were. And even now, when you listen to them, you think, "Wow, this guy can really explain things well, step by step by step." Whether it's the banking crisis, or the Arsenal of Democracy speech, or the speech in the fireside chat in February of '42 when everything is going so bad. He was such a good communicator.
Oh, and that was the age of communication. It's a great question. Who was better, Winston Churchill, Adolf Hitler at the mic, or FDR?
I think FDR was better. I mean, I don't think you can completely separate the message from the messenger, because I think you get better credit for a productive message than you would for a message like Hitler. I mean, but I think that overall, I think FDR was best because Hitler was trying to manipulate, and Roosevelt in his fireside chats, you listen to them, they're reasonable. This is what we're doing. This is how we're doing, and it's not manipulation. It's just explanation.
I love Winston Churchill, and I'm a huge FDR fan. But
Winston Churchill is tremendous as well.
When that moment when he says "some chicken," and they real quickly, there's a speeches in Parliament, and Winston stands. I was got the cigar, and there's a hole in the roof from the Blitz, and he said, Herr Führer, Herr Hitler said he would wring our necks like chickens, and then he goes about 3 paws, and he goes, "Some chicken." They come apart. They come apart. He gets a 3 paws, and he says, "Some neck."
That's great.
Oh,
that's great.
That's the speech. And, the lights shining down from the roof holes, and he's standing there, and they've turned it back.
Yep.
And
you could probably say that Churchill is exactly what was needed in that setting, and Roosevelt was exactly what was needed in this setting. And if you reverse them, they wouldn't be as effective.
And Stalin was where he was, who takes on the blunt. And what a moment!
Yeah, anybody who downplays the role of the Soviets in World War II after 1941 doesn't know what they're talking about.
Has no idea. The largest land army in Europe is the Red Army, and they're willing to die.
And they're tying up 85% of the German army.
That's right. And the biggest thing you could do in the German army is threaten somebody you're getting transferred to the east.
Exactly. I learned that on Hogan's Heroes.
Oh, yeah. They didn't want to go there. I'm sorry. Now I'll stay. I got a minute. Professor, thank you so much. You always make these shows happen. We're tapping out.
This is great, Peter.
Yeah, we're tapping out with full lines. So
thank you so much. I can't wait to be back with you.
You too, sir. Be safe. Thank you. Professor Joseph Smith. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're coming back on the other side. We're going to talk about what has happened to Harley Davidson. What a great example how, and again, FDR, Ronald Reagan, saves Harley Davidson. What was his weapon of saving? Tariffs. Stay here, 710 KNUS. With a line open, good afternoon, everybody. 710 KNUS. We are Denver's talk station. It is a beautiful day. All my friends, all my rowdy friends, get ready to ride some motorcycles. 86 will be the high, and 70 on Sunday, Monday, 60 degrees. We started the show this way, and then we switched over to the great Professor Smith, and now we're back. And it's about Ronald Reagan, and it also ties very much so into what's happening today in the markets, but using Harley Davidson as the model. Now, they're using words like the CEO is going to retire. That's like he's off the building. Did he jump, or was he pushed? We were talking about the times of the Fuhrer, and there was always a theme that ran through them. It said, the gun is in the desk in the other room. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. Take your own life. So Harley Davidson, I've tried to make this case so many times, there is a culture, and it's much more than the motorcycles. And I think that people who do get involved with all of this stuff and love it and understand it, they'd probably, I don't know if they'd agree or not, I hope they would, but the culture of Harley Davidson is more than motorcycles. It's, it's Arthur Davidson, or the Davidson, William Harley, and everybody that builds these remarkable bikes since 1912. So this is the model I want to use because there's two ends to this. So in 1983, Ronald Reagan is the president of the United States, and he intervenes to protect the motor company by imposing what? Tariffs. Remember that, on imported motorcycles primarily aimed at the Japanese manufacturers. Of course it was. Honda, Kawasaki, the big ones. They were dumping bikes. The action follows recommendations of the U.S. International Trade Commission that helped the company recover. Now, the backstory is, remember the bowling company AMF? AMF owned Harley Davidson. Harley was facing significant, big financial difficulties, intense competition, but the Japanese manufacturers were flooding the market with cheaper motorcycles. Now, Honda makes a motorcycle called a Gold Wing, G-O-L-D, Gold Wing. I think it's the coolest motorcycle in the world. I just love it. And they were dumping their big bikes, and this is back now in 83. You could buy a big motorcycle, big Japanese-made bike in the United States cheaper than you could buy it in Japan. It's called dumping. So the Trade Commission concludes the influx of these Japanese motorcycles are harming the domestic industry and recommend protective measures. Now, there's a Willie G. Davidson who actually I know, a guy named Bluestein, a handful of these guys. They're motorcyclists, and they get the company back, and they go to the president, to Reagan, and they go, Mr. Reagan, and President Reagan agreed to impose the danger word, right? A tariff on imported motorcycles with engines over 700 cc's. They didn't touch the dirt bikes. They went at the big tours. And they raised the tariff from, now get ready, 4.4% to, Ronald Reagan raises it to 49.4%. And all my listening and reading and watching, and the tariff was designed to provide relief for Harley that was setting itself up, and they were in huge declines, much like something we're going to talk about. Eventually, they go back to the original model, and again, the Harley-Davidson tariffs, Ronald Reagan protects them, and then comes that wonderful moment that they ride down Wall Street, all abreast on the big bikes, and they have been saved. The first term, to protect the company, the motor company, Ronald Reagan does the heavy tariffs on these imported motorcycles, helped save the Harley Corporation and save a lot of jobs, American jobs, and they always credited Ronald Reagan with saving. Jump ahead in time. So the motor company goes outside the box and hires a new CEO. He's off the building. Did he jump or was he pushed? And the amount of people that I know that have, and I'm going to jump into another moment. We're in Sturgis, and we see the first year that we're there, it's really watched them destroy themselves. Bud Light. And if you've been to Sturgis, I've asked, we haven't had an opportunity to go back to it, but anybody that was there for those 2 years, 303-696, 1971. So Kenny and I are up there, and we see it. They have a big, wide open bar, but they've used the transsexuals in the advertising. There's a woman that they all talk about. What was her name? Dylan. Adam, what was her name? Dylan Mulvaney. I remember at least part of it. And she lost her gig over it, should have, but so this is called not knowing your client, not knowing your target, not knowing your customer. So if you look at Harley Davidson's, and I come back full circle to the culture of the motorcycle, not the bike, but the culture of Harley Davidson, and it's more than motorcycles. So here they are. Now, if you look at this target, they're principally men and middle-aged men. By and large, they're veterans, Republican, Trump supporters. I mean, you get on a list of things. This Bud Light thing flies into their face. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's your customer. That's your target. Well, I don't like that. Well, too bad. Life's tough. Play hard. They want the bikes, and they don't want this that goes with it. So that bar sat empty. I mean, we saw the horses. They were still in the truck, the Clydesdales. A year later, by the way, that bar's still empty. A year later, what do they do? What does the CEO and others of Harley Davidson do? They do the same damn thing. So stupid, beyond stupid. This is George Bush kind of stupid. This isn't just, flubbing around stupid. It's just, so now Jochen Zeist he will retire. It was either going to be him or the company. But they're, already covering up and telling lies and everything about it. But maybe now the stock bounced up, and maybe now. But the operative word was they saved them. And Joachim will be retiring. Learn. All right, this is Dean in Denver. Dino, thanks, man. You're on the radio show. Good afternoon.
Well, I appreciate your comment in regard to tariff being applied under Reagan as well as Trump.
Oh, yeah.
For the same purpose.
Right, yeah, sure.
Exactly the same purpose.
But
I have a little quote that's kind of interesting. The past is to learn.
That's why it's called the past.
And the present is for opportunity.
It's a gift.
And the future is to get a return on that.
All true.
Now, and that applies economically.
Everything.
As well as war. But anyway, the only comment I wanted to make, you tend to lean, competition is the thesis of our form of government. And sometimes tariffs, because of different economic situations in different countries, are faced with they come up with a lower labor cost. So that's
the model in reverse.
The tariff is simply for the purpose of equalizing it.
Well,
that's all it's for.
The multinational should have never been allowed to exist in the terms of its ability to change American foreign policy, to run foreign policy, to keep people in office, every bit of nonsense with it. We talked a bit about it last Saturday, but at one time there were the seven sisters. They were called the petroleum companies, 7 majors. They have now morphed into 5. And the war in the Gulf, the first war, the democratic people of Kuwait Do you think Herbert Walker Bush went to war to save the democracy in Kuwait or to save the oil companies?
To keep Iraq out of Arabia. No. Because what we did, and the purpose of that, of course, was to protect our interests as well. But the big oil catch, he had not developed his oil in Iraq. Therefore, the cream of the crop lie in Arabia. It was already developed, available for market. And he would have provided, it would have been economic.
But he would have sold it.
Advantage for him to do that.
Oh, he would have sold it. But remember, he's our boy. When this is when you start to see who they really are. There was something called the War of the Cities, Iran-Iraq War. Now, we have AWACS picking targets and sending all of this to our gallant ally Saddam Hussein. So we back Saddam against the people who got rid of our other gallant ally, the Shah. And so now the multinational queries itself. And in the meantime, we're selling military hardware hand over fist to everybody. And so when the invasion comes, and whether or not Saddam's on the level about April Gillespie or not, that he said, I got the green light to go, and the Kuwaitis were slant drilling them and all this kind of stuff. That's not for me. But when the war begins, and it was Operation Desert Shield and then Desert Storm.
Correct.
If anybody thinks, but because the story they told was, we must save these gallant people, the Kuwaitis. Come on,
I don't know. That really wasn't necessarily the story. The issue was that was just a stop sign to turn north. That was the whole purpose of that. They just raped and pillaged Kuwait.
I was there. I was there. I saw it. I saw the aftermath of it. And
right.
Yeah. I mean,
is there any question?
It was sad. I mean,
sure.
It was horrible. But I was there when the Emir came back. I mean, there wasn't nobody votes, no free press. I mean, all that kind of stuff. I'm not throwing the rocks at him. I'm just saying, don't sell me that story. Tell me that you want to save multinational petroleum companies. At least I'll know the truth.
Well, the matter of the fact is that they were the main player in the international oil market. It was important for us not only to protect our industry in Saudi Arabia, which they later nationalized, but to protect them, because it was going to influence, it would have given the Iraqis tremendous power in the world, given at that time oil supremacy.
The multinational oil companies, they fly no flag. They do business with some of the worst human beings on the face of the earth and don't even blink. So to come up with this idea of, with respect, that we were going to not do business with Saddam, you're kidding me. We just ended up with lengthy experiences with Saddam. We're selling Saddam weaponry. We're doing different things with Saddam. Saddam's our guy against the Ayatollah, against the mullahs. And suddenly he's not your guy anymore. Noriega found that out quickly. He used to be our guy. Suddenly he's not our guy. When the Shah got pushed out and had to get pushed back in to become our guy again. I mean, you have to see that the multinationals play this role with American military and American foreign policy. And to think that if Saddam had gotten his hands on Kuwaiti oil, he'd have sold it to us.
At a price.
Well, I mean, now you're switching gears a little bit.
I'm not. You're switching.
No, I'm not. I'm telling you why we fought that war.
We fought that war to protect the oil supply in Arabia at the time.
For whom? For whom?
For us and the rest of the world.
No, for the multinational. They'd have bought the oil. Look at the people that the multinational corporations do business with before you tell me, oh, Saddam's a terrible person.
I didn't say anything like that.
No, that's the argument. Saddam was a horrible person. Really. Look around. Venezuela? Please.
Well,
Africa.
All I'm saying, Peter, is that he wanted Saudi Arabia oil because he hadn't developed it in his own country, and therefore, if he had control of it, he would have had control of OPEC. Saudi Arabia still, to a great extent, has
there's a weapon.
The predominance in OPEC.
There's a weapon.
I had friends of mine that were Iranian that worked there.
Yeah. OPEC is a great weapon, and it was a smart weapon. When it was Yamani, I think, was the sheikh, and they looked around, and that's how those wars ended, because they decided oil was going to be a weapon. That's the beauty of that book, The Formula. When I've said this before, they're in the boardroom in London, and it's Royal Dutch Shell. It's the sisters, and they're there. And everybody's got a Seville row on and coiffed hair, and they look like $1 million, and they got an Aston Martin or a Mercedes or something outside. And at the table, somebody raises a finger and says to the chairman, well, the Arabs, and he begins that way, and this guy quells him and says, you forget. And it's all Anglo men. We're the Arabs. I thought it was a really telling moment. We're the Arabs. And they will do, I mean, all this kind of
stuff. Don't switch my nationality, Peter, please.
No, but you know what I'm saying. No, I mean, what, don't.
We had dominance. We had dominance in the oil. Well, we played a big role in the oil market at that time. But today, you look at the situation, Russia's economy's in the toilet, and China's infiltrated our market to no end.
Yeah.
And therefore, Trump's only response has to be equalization and vis-a-vis the Trump.
The Reagan story.
Played over.
Oh, it was, I'm a huge Reagan fan. And when Reagan intervened to protect Harley by imposing what magic word? Tariffs on the big Japanese bikes. They were dumping bikes in this country.
Right.
And he stopped it, and he gave Willie G. and Bluestein and those guys, he gave them a chance to get back on their feet, and they did.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful story. I'd like, did you go over there, and did you live in the Middle East?
No, but I had a very good friend of mine that at the time was in OPEC when the Shah came down.
Oh, boy.
And he actually rented his house to the Chinese embassy.
Oh,
and they were coming in. Of course, the Chinese play nothing in the world oil market, but the Russians today, because the ruble's in the toilet, they're trading simply all the trading that's going on is vis-a-vis oil.
Yeah.
That's what they're trading. Well, now, the other thing is that the Chinese, of course, are very interested in developing the bases in the south. And the purpose of that, you know what the purpose of that is? They got 5,000 plus power plants that are all coal
fired. Well, they open a new coal power plant like once a month.
Correct. And where's the coal?
In terms of
to supply it.
We're Russia and North Korea.
No, they're not.
Aren't they? I thought
Australia. Australia is a big coal producer.
I thought they were doing that business with the trains out of North Korea. I'd love to call. I got to pull a pin. Thank you, sir. Wonderful call. Thank you so much. We continue. 710 KNUS Denver's Talk Station. The opening. Opened a lot of grass. The opening. Easy Rider. Damn the Pusher Man. Remember, he pulls up, takes his watch off. He's got that long, no brake front end, chopper. Peter Fonda on a bike, takes the watch off, puts it on a rock. Time stops. John Kay and Steppenwolf. They also do The Song. Huh? And he was born in Germany. Did you know that? John Kay was German. They did Steppenwolf. Damn the Pusher Man. Good afternoon, everybody. 1224, 86 the high. It is 710 KNUS. Been a wonderful show. First time we actually have 3 lines open. We've been jammed all morning. 3 of you were trying to get in, got a busy. 303-696-1971. The Capitalist Law Firm. This is my guy, Danny, and Dan suggests that you choose a lawyer who shares your values because who you choose to represent you speaks volume. He's been a friend for a long time. He helped us out, and he still stays a friend. I did a show with him, and he's the man. He's believed to be the only lawyer in Colorado to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash cases. And Dan's believed to have won the largest truck crash case in Colorado history. Dan Capitalist Law, the official law firm. Dan now with the Nuggets and the Avalanche. He's moving on up. He is my guy. And Dan Capitalist Law is a serious firm for serious cases. If you need some help, Danny accepts righteous injury cases on percentage fee basis. He can represent good people from all walks of life, regardless of ability to pay. He's been a good friend. If you need Dan's help, 303-770-5551. 303-770-5551. 770-5551. Or Dan Capitalist Law, C-A-P-L-I-S, capitalistlawcom. All right, we go back to the phones. We have a line open. This is Jim. Jim, you're on a radio show. Good afternoon. Thanks.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for playing The Pusher Man by John Kay. That was my first concert when I was in high school. It was the greatest. I'd never seen so many damn hippies in my life.
I've heard all the, and then they make it, because Dennis Hopper is so brilliant. That's the first picture to take popular music and use it as the backdrop for the film. That LP,
fantastic.
Yeah, it's the Steppenwolf.
Yeah,
it's everybody.
So yeah. after I got out of boot camp, I went to Operation Earnest Will.
Yeah.
On a little destroyer called the USS Paul F. Foster, and we escorted oil through the Straits of Hormuz over there. And Steve Bannon was on the ship with my first cruise. We had an issue with the sonar dome. We had to pull off early, but I went back for the second cruise. And it's amazing to see those massive oil tankers. When they go into the Persian Gulf, they look like 10-story buildings. When they come out, they got like 18 inches above the waterline. It's done for a purpose. And if we think it has anything to do with free markets, we're absolutely stoned.
That's the stupidity of it all. It's the multinational.
In fact, in the 80s, 1982 is the precursor to NAFTA. And in 1986, the Plaza Accord was signed because we had to get out of this stagflation from the 70s when Nixon destroyed our gold connection with our currency. And we tied it to sweet crude and primarily Sunni sweet crude. So the Shias were our primary enemy. And the Shias are still the primary enemy this many years later of AIPAC. And Israel.
But remember, again, your points are really well taken.
Well, they're history, Pete.
Well, of course, and I'm saying, but
Yeah.
history is interesting because I have an undergraduate degree in history, and I have big deal, but I have a Bachelor of Arts. And now, if you have a degree in math, you have a degree in science. You have a bachelor degree in science, because history is interpretive. So it's like literature. You know, you can tell it one way. I can tell it another way. There's all these different approaches to history. We're talking about Carlyle's theory, the great man, the Marxist theory. You know, this, that, the other thing, and now there's the history is driven by technology. I mean, again and again and again, it changes. So I can.
So
when we were kids, when I was a kid, in school, I loved history even then, and we were taught that George Custer was a good guy, and that they were brutally massacred by the Sioux, and on and on and on. The truth is 100% the other way, you know. But we were not told. We were not allowed to know, because it wasn't the appropriate approach.
Can't argue with that.
No, if you think about it, the what black people were in your high school history book, George Washington Carver.
Maybe three.
Yeah, let's see. Maybe Frederick Douglass. Maybe, and that was it. You know, no Native people, certainly no Clara Barton and Betsy Ross, and who? Women? They weren't there. So
now, as you know, and the last thing I want to say, as my father's and my lifetimes, as we watched this nation evolve, you got to understand one thing: the massive bubble of young people that we had after World War II served this country and created this massive economic profile that we have right now.
Absolutely.
And even in the 80s, when we still had a labor surplus, which means cheap labor, our so-called leaders and our business leaders, they outsourced our industrial jobs when we had a labor surplus. Now, if any of these geniuses think they're going to bring any of these jobs back to this nation with a deficiency of labor, I mean, all we got to do is look at what they're doing with the brown people right now, deporting them.
Mm-hmm.
There is no sincerity in bringing anything back because there are no young people to do the job.
But when this country was industrialized, or I got out of high school, went in a mill. Mill's not there now. Guys that I know now that I actually ride with, got out of high school. Where'd they go? Samsonite, Gates. Where do they go? Where do they go now?
But that doesn't make you great, Peter. That means you were part of the labor excess.
But look,
that was occurring at that time.
But hang on.
Mm-hmm.
I barely got out of high school. The only reason I graduated, I think, was because they didn't want me around, and there was a job, and it paid. And my dad's another example where they had health insurance. The union got everybody. We didn't need the government, the Obamacare plan. We didn't need this.
No, wait a second. Those jobs, some like those rubber factories and those tire factories, they were left over from World War II, where the government created a process that cost more than the atomic bomb to come up with synthetic rubber. They made, and they created 48 rubber plants and tire plants, and they turned them over to the corporations, Peter. And then the corporations,
Goodyear,
after the boys came back.
I've read this stuff. It's Goodyear is one, and what's the other one? Firestone.
All of them.
Yeah, but they
gave them away.
But listen, the same thing could be said about inventing antibiotics and all these kinds of things. In moments of crisis, you're going to get technology. I don't care if it's going to Jack Kennedy decided to go to the moon, really just to play up with the Russians. But no, that happened universally. They built the big car plants in Detroit, Dodge, Maine, and Ford. They did absolutely. They were built by the government, and
absolutely.
But then they wanted.
They unionized, Pete, and then they had to be done away with. Have you read about the actual effects of the Plaza Accord in 1985?
Yes.
Have you read what that did to working people and to productive people? And it created a financial balloon that is dragging our real economy around.
But U.S.
It's
Steel,
over, Peter.
U.S. Steel decides to go to Shanghai and take the jobs.
They don't decide. They're subsidized by our government to do that.
But when they started building electromelt furnaces in China, not building them in the United States, in Gary, Indiana, or Pittsburgh or Birmingham, they built them in the PRC. Why? Because the guy in the PRC is 85 cents an hour, no health care, go screw yourself. And
he urinates in the open sewer.
And the guy where I grew up, he could buy his own house, and he could put his kid in school, and he could get an Evinrude, and he could do all these things. Well, they broke his back.
See, you have to buy Bitcoin, and you have to get into the stock market, or you have to buy a lottery ticket or sue somebody in this economy. That's what the young people are thinking right now. We've trained our young people to think work is for immigrants.
Well,
and I wholeheartedly believe that, and I've been witnessing that for 20 years.
You take care. It's a good call, man. Smart man.
Take
Thanks.
care, boss.
All right. Where we stand here? We're good? 5 minutes? We have 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes. Okay. I lose track of time. We go to Greg in Lakewood. You're on a radio show, man. Good afternoon.
Peter's a great one-eyed king. How are you?
The king is here. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Last hour you were talking with the professor. Thank you again for bringing him on, even if it is only once a month. The two of you are just great together. And anyway, you mentioned the term, or you used the term, right the ship.
Yes.
And when talking about the tariffs. Back in the day when they were building these tall ships with wood keels and 50-foot masts, they would have to put heavy rocks down in the bottom to keep the ship upright.
Sure, of course, yes.
It's balanced, right. Now, that slowed the ship down, of course, and used up space that could be used for cargo, but you couldn't sail without it.
True.
I mean, it's kind of esoteric, but that's the way I look at these tariffs. Now, have you read Trump's book, Art of the Deal?
Yeah, a long time. He didn't write it. Another guy wrote it for him. He put his name on it, but
the outline is there.
Yeah,
the outline is there. Yeah. You shoot high to settle medium, and it pisses off the left big time because they control it.
I don't know who Trump's making mad right now. I think he's making everybody, all the interests, the left. The two great losers in November were Heritage Media and the Democratic Party. And they have to figure out what they're going to do next. Trump, and I'm not the greatest Trump fan in the world, but what we're watching happen right now, first of all, needs to be done. Trump's pretty ham-handed, but Kurt Vonnegut, so it goes. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do believe that if you're going to be able to force means of production, as the economists call it, cement, steel, if you're going to force it back, this is the only way I can think of to do it.
Right. Well, the thing that concerns me is with the Doge going on and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we do get all this stuff brought back to the United States, who's going to work in these factories?
There's going to be a hell of a lot of robots. That's one.
That's true, but I mean, I just don't see the.
I think the culture we're back now where we started. I made $3.15 an hour. And I was not 18 years old, and I had I got health insurance when I went in the union, but that was, $3.15 an hour the summer of 1961. I was flush.
Yeah,
I was the man.
Gasoline 15 cents a gallon.
25. Yeah, well, and I had two cars. One was I called my winter car, and that was a 1954 four-door Ford that the door wouldn't shut. We tied them together with clothesline to keep the door shut. If you took a girl out, she had to get in the driver's side and slide over. I carried a block in the floorboard in the back that was because the handbrake didn't work, and if I could push it up, I parked that car nose on a telephone pole.
Yep.
And I put a block on it. Yeah, that's what we did. Yeah.
One more thing that concerns tariffs is that, and what Elon Musk is exposing, he has no power above and beyond exposing it. But every time money changes hands, somebody skims a little off it. Somebody
always. You bite. Yeah. What is it called? Wet my beak.
1 minute. That's right. And so that's the more bureaucracy is, the bigger the outlaw. More people are taking the water. No?
Hey, Bob Dylan said it right. You're a pawn in the game.
That's right.
You take care. Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, everybody. A quick turnaround, and then we come back and wrap this puppy up. Good afternoon, everybody. Next Saturday, we got one in the. Let's see, we got one in the bucket. Let me again, Pump. Read the book Chaos. You know, you want to screw your head up. Read Chaos about the Manson family, the cover-ups in L.A., believe it or not, the CIA. Hold on. There it is. The Weight. Boom, boom, boom. There's a lot to this song. To Nazareth. Now, Nazareth is the home of what guitar company? Down. People think it's biblical. And all these people are real. They all exist. Robbie Robinson and the band. And the crazy Chester was a real guy, and the guy with the dog, and they're all real, all people. Granny. Did you ever see The Last Waltz?
No.
It's the documentary on them quitting it. It's just incredible. Scorsese did it. And Robbie Robinson, boom, my bag. I was looking for a place to hide. Coming up on time, everyone. It is now 12:45, 15 before the hour. Good afternoon. We have two lines open. It always works out this way that, whenever we've jammed lines and jammed lines and jammed lines, and there's a break in the action. I think it's some kind of weird mathematical probability. 303-696-1971. 303-696-1971. Get that last shot in before we hit the bricks. I just mentioned chaos. And we got this guy on next month. He's guaranteed. He's traveling. He's in Europe. I have a friend who finished the book and called me, sent me a text. What morning was it? Like Thursday morning or Friday morning. I get a text early in the morning. I finished it. I pick up the phone. I call her. Let's talk. That book is so nuts. And what O'Neill says when he ends the book is, I got a lot of questions. I don't have answers for them. All right, so here's the premise, and then we'll go wrap this show up. So Charlie Manson and the Manson family, a.k.a. the family, and they murder everybody in that house. They murder, Sharon Tate, the story, Jay Sebring, the people that were with them, Abigail Fulcher from Fulcher Coffee. They also murder a family called the LaBiancos. But it's more than that. And they come to this conclusion. This guy is he's got a Jones for the story. It's like I feel about the Ramseys, and I can't even equate to what he's doing. And finally he said, all right, how did they do this? And there's and one of the interesting things was this, everybody knows the Jolly story when he goes into the cell with Jack Ruby and proclaims, a CIA guy, he's a doctor, and he proclaims Ruby unfit and to testify in front of the Warren Commission. Ruby never does. We never knew why. They think this guy is now connected to Charlie Manson because the CIA is looking for the perfect murderer, the perfect killer. And they think Charlie's done it. But the ins and outs, and I can't talk to him. I can't wait to talk to him. I had an interview with Vincent Bugliosi, and Bugliosi is that word. He is a bully. And this guy makes the case. And so now he's got Bugliosi. He's got him. And he goes and he said his house, his wife's name is Gretchen. He brings up Charlie Manson. Gretchen leaves the room. He said, they're there. Wow. All right, we'll wrap this puppy up. We start with Gilbert. Hey, Gilbert, my boy, where you been? How are you?
Hey, Peter. I'm fighting the corporation thing on my own. State Farm's.
Yeah.
Said they're going to cancel me because my deck isn't done. So, anyway, I just wanted to say it's good to hear you. Glad that you're doing well. You're going to be able to ride that big three-wheeler up the surface this year?
Who's going to ride that big three-wheeler? Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites.
Who's going to make the first mistake?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, who's going to run all the way to Fire Lake?
The video's really nice, too.
Did you ever see, I love him. I mean, he doesn't do one song I don't like.
No, I know.
And
I know.
It's the Silver Bullet Band. Which wonder what that
right.
means. Wonder what that means.
I saw him. I'm not sure. It sounds like a vampire thing, but
I could tell people stories about this caller because we're brothers on so many different, but I won't do it. Statute of limitations.
We've seen each other around for so long.
Once or twice, yes.
Yes, once or twice.
Yes.
And now I forgot what I was going to say. I saw Bob in concert when he was here in Denver.
Yep.
And, he's older, gray hair and everything, like all of us.
Yep.
And he was so good.
It's great.
He was didn't disappoint at all. He sounded just as good.
I think if I were picking songs, Roll. When he does Roll.
Yes.
And
Roll Me Away.
Roll Me Away.
Oh man, that's the one, really.
The first time I went to Sturgis, and coming down through the canyon into Deadwood and then further down, and the first time I ever saw any of that, and Roll was, hey, find Roll, if you would please, and Roll's playing, and
I could go east, I could go west.
I could go west, he said, and I saw a young hawk. And so and he just captured, because he knows the life, so he captures it. It's like David Mann,
Oh yeah.
Looking at David Mann.
Oh yeah.
And knowing that
that
David Mann printed what he saw, or painted what he saw.
He put a book out, a picture book, and I have it. It's just wonderful to look at all the time.
Oh yeah, I mean it doesn't change. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, glad you're back, and I hope that you're feeling better.
I'll see you out there.
I know my dad went through a lot of problems, and I know that it's tough, but it's good to hear your voice, man. And maybe we'll catch up with each other one of these days on the road.
Right next to you. Love you. Thank you, Gilbert.
Okay.
Thank you.
Later, man.
All right. So this is it, right? Would you play it out early? Can we play it? 3 minutes? How long is the song? Hang on, Peter. Do it. Stay it there. But, I was trying to make the case earlier about Harley Davidson is a culture. It isn't just a motorcycle. The motorcycle is very much a part of it, but the culture and why people got mad at the CEO and watching the stupid things they were done. But the culture of Harley Davidson is so much more than a motorcycle. And there's just something about it. And as somebody once said, if you didn't get it, then you won't. As a little kid, I liked them. And then I remember the first motorcycle I ever rode, and I got one sitting out there right now. And bikers have always been a brotherhood. And one of the unique, I think, aspects of Harley Davidson culture is the sense of camaraderie and the brotherhood of bikers. I certainly have it. And they organize events, and off they go. Let's get us out of here on a beautiful Saturday. Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. I'll see you next Saturday. I'm coming into Deadwood on this tune. Roll me away. Roll! Take care, you guys. See you next Saturday.